And to my left,
George Morse,
Jim Robinson.
Paul Haverty,
Rachel McManus.
Pete Pecos.
Martha Taylor.
and so welcome everyone. On our agenda tonight, we have two appearances on lot line adjustments, A&Rs, one on Green Street and one on Orchard Street, a public hearing continuation for a special permit application for Borrego Solar Systems. We have the January financial report and some old business to talk about the zoning amendments for recreational marijuana and the Byfield Estates 40B project. So that's what we intend to handle tonight. Do you want me to do these now, these financial reports? Because I don't think we had enough. Everybody got the meeting minutes, but I'm sure they came around 4 o'clock. So I don't think it's inapproval.
One set, one's a good one set.
So let's, hold on. So do you want me to sign these then?
Sure, before that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Joe.
Walking up the door right
You said that's your job.
here. He used to be Elizabeth. Thanks, Peter. Okay, is Mr. Andrews here? Oh, we've seen you before.
Yeah. Different matter, but yes.
Different matter. So do you need to, do you have some plans you want to present
I
to
do.
us and kind of come up and
Sure.
maybe grab one of these chairs and you can sit right in front of us if you like.
Okay. Tell me the protocol because I have not hit them.
There you go, there's the protocol.
All right. So I've got 4 copies, or 5 copies of this. So this is, you want this?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's,
divide them up.
we were sent this on, on the computer. It's always kind of difficult to understand exactly what is being asked for, so.
Okay, so let me maybe look at, there's more copies of it.
Do you have the Form A,
I do.
the check? That also needs to be signed.
Okay.
Okay, so we have one in the middle and one there.
Okay, so what I'm attempting to do here, this is my current property at 66 Green Street, which is here. Here's Green Street, here's Noise Lane. Here's my current property, and what I'm attempting to do is buy the barn and roughly 15,000 square feet off from the Jackmans and combine it with my lot.
Okay, so I'm confused. So where is the Jackman's house on this?
Well, they don't have a house, there's a barn that's here. And
But they have this.
Well, that's my house. I bought that a couple years ago.
Where's, oh, wait, is that the old Jackman house?
That is. Not,
Now I
not
understand.
Jackman.
That's 66?
That's 66. So I purchased this, but sometime prior, the land had been split, and the barn, and I think 20-something acres, still remains owned by Eva and Fred Jackman.
Okay.
And so what I am trying to do is buy the barn and 15,000 square feet, and also clear up some lot line boundaries that from prior, looks like from prior sale and purchases between the Jackmans and the McIntoshes resulted in some lines that weren't clear.
Mhm.
So what I'm putting in front of you today is the outline of the barn and the land that would now become part of my existing lot at 66.
Okay. Do the Jackmans still own any of this property, or any?
They do.
Do they own this?
They do, they own this.
All of
and they-
this?
And they own all of this here.
That's
But
what I
look
thought.
at this, and it goes all the way back.
Right,
Past the ledge and all that.
Okay.
This is
So So is this just a simply small scale of this? Is this a small scale of this? Is this the barn?
This is the barn, correct, and this is my house here.
And
Do
everything
you own
else is,
parcel one also?
I do per deed, but it was never recorded.
Okay.
So what happened was this parcel 1 and parcel 2 was sold at some point earlier, but it was never recorded with the town, so I had a deed to it. But there was nothing came before you all or your previous existence back in 2002.
Was it sold to somebody else before you?
Yeah, it was sold to the Macintoshes.
Okay.
But there was never any plan representing
Yeah.
what was in the deed.
That deed was never recorded.
The deed was recorded.
Was recorded. Okay. Did they sell to you?
The Macintoshes, yes.
Yes. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I had that chain.
Martha, are there other technical issues involved with this?
Well, we've gone through it, it has the frontage, as Ray said, he's trying to clear up the previous deed issues.
Oh, okay. So, does that need to be done before we take any action, or what?
No, I mean, that's part of
That's just,
this. There is some zoning questions which need to be dealt with.
Right.
There can be, what I've been advised is that these parcels have the appropriate frontage, so the planning board, there's no reason that the planning board should not endorse them.
okay. Do you see, anybody have any questions about this? Or ideas? They are pretty straightforward, the
My
union owners.
concern was about the ownership.
Yeah,
That was it.
right. Well, good luck in cleaning this stuff up, hopefully you can.
Thank you.
But, yeah, can I have a motion, Chairman?
Yeah, I move to accept for approval not required, the plan of land in Newbury, owners and applicants Ray L. and Elizabeth H. Andrews, 66 Green Street, Eva M. Jackman, trustee, 68 Green Street, dated February 6, 2018.
I have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion about this? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Good luck.
Okay. Martha, what do I do now?
So, now, you got the Mylar.
I do.
Okay, John will sign the Mylar,
Okay.
and then you want to sign the rest of these, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do them in the Mylar, right?
Yeah.
And then the Form As too.
You have enough steps?
I think so.
And Tony said make sure it's legible.
See, if he was signing, we'd have a problem.
Then I'd have an issue.
He's a doctor. No, I don't know. You, right?
Okay.
Yes,
Today's date?
second.
No,
Today's
just
date,
today.
yes, yeah.
That's what you want.
Just found it.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think, do I need this signed as well? This is the original.
Yes,
So it's got Eva, myself, and
Okay.
Liz.
okay, all right. So we can, so as not to hold things up, we can
I'll sign that later.
those afterwards, and then if you want to email a copy to you.
Okay. And does the second page of this need to be signed?
Yes.
There you go.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, best of luck. You're welcome.
Welcome.
Chair should say. Chair.
Oh, I guess so, sure.
Bob might want
Bob Grasso.
Good evening.
How are you?
For the record, my name is Bob Grasso from Engineering Connections.
Right.
This is
just a, this is the existing lots right now that we're dealing with. There's two lots located on Orchard Street, which is a public road variable width. There's two properties currently located on the zoning map.
I'm looking at it this way, am I right?
Yes,
Let me just like that.
Yeah. The existing lots right now are here.
So
That's 177.
that's lot?
That's 177. That's
Okay.
our lot 3.
Okay.
And the other parcel, well, lot that goes around it is here, goes to the Pocket River, along the bank, here, down here, this.
Okay. Got it.
and
So
like
it's
that.
this,
So
so
there's
it's
two
this.
parcels. What we're proposing to do,
Oh, you got two houses on one lot?
yeah, that's an accessory building. It's not the primary building. We have wetland located on the lot, shown right here, which we located, which you cannot, under your zoning planning board regulations, you cannot count as upland. Here, here. And then we have an EC area of critical environmental concern, which is elevation 10, shown on this heading line right here. Which cannot be counted as area for, which
Right.
is in the RA zone for 40,000 square feet. So you cannot count any of the blue or the green area for each lot.
Lot.
So what we're proposing to do is take one
Was it
parcel,
here?
parcel A, big lot, here,
There you go.
and
Yep.
that would be parcel A, and that's a parcel B. They're not buildable lots, because they don't have frontage area. We're gonna add that to lot 3, which
All of that?
All
Wait a
of
minute,
that.
get to here?
is to lot 3, which is gonna be this. This is gonna be lot 3. In green.
Okay, got it. Okay,
Makes it a little easier.
yes. Good call.
So that is lot 3, right here.
Got it.
So that has total frontage of 292.75 and a lot area of 80,000 and a contiguous upland of 41,000, which is only, the minimum requirement is 32,000. So that's that one. So off the big lot, we're creating this lot line here, here, like that, which would be lot 1. And that frontage is 176.43, and that has an area of 3.4 acres, which is 152,021 square feet, and it's approximately 123,553. And the remaining would be this lot, like this lot 2, and that has total frontage of 161.78. And a lot area of
Got it,
94 feet.
got it. Any questions?
I don't know.
It's rationalizing it, makes sense.
Well,
How did it
if
sit
I
like
just show
that?
you like,
I mean, they just
well-
put this stuff, I mean, when did they put these other ancillary structures up there?
they're fairly old houses.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It was basically one
50s
owner at
and
one
50s.
time, Bulgaris.
Yeah,
Who gave you
And,
that? Alicia?
Bulgaris died, the wife still lives at 177.
Oh, okay.
And the trust, of the Bulgaris Family Trust, owns this big parcel. And from 2 lots, they wanted to get another
Yeah.
lot for the trust.
I think it's
That
fine,
makes sense.
that's fine.
So
Anybody have
it's
any
fairly front.
thoughts or questions? I think it's pretty straigght. Do you have any?
No, I've been.
Are there any
I've
objections
got
or
the
any?
frontage that it needs and
No, good.
You know, there's that, that total frontage allowance, 292.
Okay. Okay, Okay, can I have a motion?
Yeah, I move to accept the
There you go.
plan of land, Newbury, Massachusetts, owner and applicant, Bulgara Supplemental Needs Trust, 173 Orchard Street, Newbury, Mass. Covering lots 171, 173, and 177 Orchard Street, lots 1, 2, and 3, parcel A and B, Newbury, Mass, dated January 29, 2018. This approval not required plan.
Can I have a second, please? Any further comment from anyone? All those in favor?
Aye.
So we have to do-
Good.
Just with the topography, it makes it really.
Bring it
Yeah,
down.
it does.
So that's why I bought my color charts. Actually, I had to do that with the owner.
Did you
She couldn't
practice that
understand.
before you came in? Practice that before you came in?
No, where is it? Okay. Something, what is it?
Dogs.
Throws off my whole, you know. Yeah.
I'm surprised they held it. Surprised they held it, so just for
This is a paper one, but
Yeah,
let's do that
that's
too?
pressure. No, we'll do this later.
All right.
Throw that one away.
Oh, that was an example.
I gave you 4 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay. So, thanks a lot. Thank you.
So just email your copy for me. Do you want me to email your copy for me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to reopen public hearing that we've been working on for a bit of time for the public hearing continuation of special permit application 2.795 megawatt solar energy generating system 136 Main Street, applicant Borrego Solar Systems Inc. So we have been going back and forth with various memos from Joe Sirota, our consultant, and you, Rob, and a little bit with you, Steve. And I'm wondering if it might be appropriate for you, either one of you, whoever wants to do it, to maybe give a summary of where you guys think you are at this point in time. I thought for a while that we might have too many crossing memos, but I think that looking at Joe's that I got today, I think that he may have answered most of them. So if you could take some time to do that, I'd appreciate it.
To start with, presentations here for you. Short this time.
Thank you.
And there are, talk about that in a moment. Alrighty, for the record, I'm Robert Rosine with Waterstone Engineering, here on behalf of Borrego Solar. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Haverty, Ms. Taylor, and members of the board. Hope you all got here safely. Interesting evening. So since we last met on the 24th, there were a number of remaining items that we spent some time revising, and I think we submitted them, I believe, they were all delivered this following Monday, or this previous Monday. And those various items, for the most part, I think the items we were working on were to address specific questions by Mr. Sorotka and some additional information that we had kind of gone back and forth on regarding some of the landscaping and other pieces. So I have all those items included in the presentation. I'm not necessarily sure that we'll need to go through them in any detail, but they're here in case we'd like to have some conversation about that. So just a quick summary of what we'll talk about today, or this evening, is the third-party review. The most recent one has been completed. We received that today on the 7th. I won't go into that yet. An errata on the special permit application was fixed distance from the abutter. Operation and maintenance plan, some clarification with respect to the wording regarding the amphibian protection, and then a number of specific items that were covered in the plans that were addressed by Mr. Surratt in particular. Lastly, or not lastly, but a revised decommissioning estimate was also requested by the board, and then a truck traffic estimate. And I've got all those pieces here in detail for you. And before I get into that, in our last conversation, we've been asked to kind of try and prepare or present. You'd asked for a report, but this is instead a graphic that was developed, I think back in, I can't remember, back in 2010 as one of our, as part of an annual report. When I was at the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center, we put out an annual report. And this graphic, I think, describes, I hope describes what it is that we've been discussing regarding the water cycle, the effect of evapotranspiration, et cetera. So I'll go through this quickly here, and hopefully this will answer some of the questions. I think the graphic is far better than a report, to be honest. The best thing, I think, in terms of a report would be something technical and detailed that wouldn't really necessarily serve the purpose of what we're looking for here. So what this shows is it shows three different scenarios. A pre-development condition, so prior to any construction, which is the top graphic. A middle graphic, which is conventional stormwater management. That's how the building we're in, most of the roads we live on, all that is typically managed. And then low impact development, stormwater management. And there's a couple of things for you to pay attention to here. There's a 25-year rainfall event that this was modeled for. And that's a 25-year event is 5.2 inches of rainfall. And then what I want you to notice here is the size of the raindrop. So the size of the raindrop of each of these three scenarios, both size as well as the number within it, represents the amount of runoff that would occur for each of these three conditions. So in a pre-developed condition, you would expect about 2 inches of runoff to occur. In a conventional stormwater management, you would expect about 3.3 inches of runoff to occur. With low impact development stormwater management, you would expect about 1.8 inches of runoff. It depends, of course, on what the specific designs are, but this actually follows very closely with what is proposed here. And to get to your questions about evapotranspiration and some of these other items, those items are detailed in these graphics. So evapotranspiration in an undeveloped condition, you would, because of the greater amount of vegetation, you would expect about 0.9 inches of ET to occur. It doesn't actually occur during a particular storm event, but because, as I mentioned before, while it's raining, there's no ET going on, but this is in the time immediately around it. And then in a developed condition, a little less than half of that, about 0.4 inches of evapotranspiration. And then in a low impact development stormwater management, about 0.5 inches of ET. Now, in this case, the type of stormwater management that's being shown here are tree filters, bioretention systems, and porous pavement. In the example, in what we have, what's been proposed for this project is there is, despite the fact that the trees are being cleared, there is essentially the same amount of pervious area. It's in the form of grass rather than trees. There's a couple of roads and some parking areas, but it's probably less than 2% of the whole area, maybe 5% of the whole area. The point of me saying that is that the evapotranspiration that you have here, the 0.5 inches versus the 0.9, you would expect the ET to be much higher, much closer to this because of all the vegetation that exists. So this would balance a bit more. But lastly, then I want to show you and this is where the important aspect of, say, infiltration trenches or other forms of low-impact development come in. So what's intercepted or infiltrated in a pre-development condition, you'd expect about 2.3 inches, or a little more than half of your rainfall to go into the ground. In an undeveloped or in a developed condition, conventional, you'd expect about 1.5 inches to be infiltrated. And that's just edges of road and other places. And then in an LID condition, we could have as much as 2.9 inches of rainfall infiltrated. And if you recall, in the stormwater management report, we had, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but there was about 5,000 cubic feet of recharge that was required, and we had about, I think about 45,000, 46,000 of cubic feet of runoff that was recharged. And that's simply a result of needing to design for these large events, designing specifically for a 25-year rainfall event. So if you'd like, we can discuss this, if this is an appropriate time to do that, or if you'd like me to just go through the presentation.
Well, I guess my question is, I see this, and I don't want to challenge you at all, but this is obviously a hypothetical set of modeling that goes on. Are there real-life examples that you could show us?
Yes.
That would be helpful.
Yep, I have a project that we did. It's a first of the kind in the nation, actually. That we showed exactly this. So I think it's hypothetical, yes, but it's based on reality. There's the old adage with modelers: all models are wrong. Some models are useful. And this is based on a modeling piece that is, I would say, is quite useful. This is using the same approach that was used for the stormwater management report. This was modeled in HydroCAD.
Okay.
And I would be happy to.
Well, if you could just email to Martha the examples, that
Sure,
would be helpful.
sure. I'd be happy to do that. If you'd like, I actually have it right there. It would take me 2 minutes to pull it up. Yeah, let's do that. Let's get this done. All right, so you want a real example. All right, so let's do it. Okay, so this is a project that is, what do I do with that? Let's see. Let's see if this goes. Source TV input. So that looks correct.
If it's not going to come up, I wouldn't spend too much time on
I think I need a connection machine out to
it. Yeah.
the laptop.
Interesting. At this point, too.
Somehow you interrupted the signaling system.
Yes.
It's a little touchy sometimes.
I liked me when I plugged it in initially, so let's just see this first.
You don't want to use a paper videos. You never figure out how to get it back. Every time they just call it a song.
There we go.
Now it's good.
Okay, well
When
done.
all else fails, unplug it.
Yeah, that's right.
Or show the hammer. Okay, so this, I'm not going to give you this whole piece, but what this is this was one of the things that folks talk about or are concerned about I think is exactly your question, which is oftentimes municipalities are, and others are concerned that from a regulatory perspective, they're being asked to implement low-impact development, and how well do we really know that it actually works? What we know is on a system scale, there's a lot of B&P performance. We monitor bioretention systems, we monitor porous pavements, we know those things work very well. We can also monitor at a site scale, like say the scale of a particular development, like a commercial application, and there's lots of great monitoring to indicate that. But what we don't know prior to this study is watershed scale, and the reason why is because when you get at 100 or 1,000 or many thousands of acres, how many bioretention systems or otherwise does it take to actually have a measurable impact? So this particular project was done in Dover, New Hampshire. I'm not going to tell you all about that. You don't want to hear it all. Come on, you. Why is this not here? Come on.
No, I always have this problem. Presentation. It's not visible. So it's down.
Now, is it me or what's going on?
Is it frozen?
There you go, something.
So we're going to go through all of this. Okay, well, actually, let me show you this. So here it is. There's a, it's about 1.15 miles of stream. 100, how many acres are we talking about? 185 acres. And we, this watershed was 30% impervious cover. It's a highly urbanized, urban watershed, but a beautiful neighborhood. Schools, lots of neighborhoods, or lots of houses and things around, and a stream that a lot of people remember fish swimming in, but it's gotten really nasty over time, and tires and junk thrown in there. So we did neighborhood cleanups and all this other stuff, and we installed 13 different low-impact development systems that treated the equivalent of 20 acres. And restored about 800 feet of channel. And if I could retire, this is what I would retire on. This is a $1 million figure here. So what I want to show you, well, actually, before we do that, so what this shows you, this is rainfall across the top. This is 2 years of monitoring. This line here and this line here. To this side, this represents pre-construction. This represents construction. This represents post-construction. You have two different unit hydrographs. You have the hydrograph for Berry Brook, which is the impaired stream, 30% impervious cover, much bigger, much bigger peaks. And then you have a hydrograph for an undeveloped watershed right next door.
Is that flow rate?
It is flow, yeah. Sorry, this is unit discharge, which is flow divided by the watershed area. So it's a way that you compare two different watersheds of different sizes. As long as they're close, which they are, these are about 5 or 6 miles apart, they get roughly the same weather. So what you would expect to see in a highly developed watershed versus an undeveloped watershed is a lot more runoff, which is exactly what you see. The huge amount of separation here. The peaks are much higher. And then we go into a period of construction, and which is the line in red here. And then at the end of this, we're at about 11% impervious cover or thereabouts. These two hydrographs are basically mimicking each other. And so this figure is a really big deal in the literature because it represents a watershed scale evaluation or verification of low impact development and its impact on hydrology. And this was in the first couple of years. The other thing is that you would do, and they just released a report in the last month that now covers all various pollutants and other things, and it's as you would expect, or as you would hope. So I'd love to talk more about that, but I won't, unless you have other questions.
No, I'm just praying your thing works again.
Yeah. You and me both. Oh, God. Why does it do that? At least we know how to fix it. We're going to turn you off again.
There you go.
Yes.
Always easy.
Okay.
Just do it.
So if you remember, the pre-development piece that I showed you before was basically this. It's the conventional stormwater management. That's why your hydrograph would be so much larger, because you have, if you're comparing it to 2 inches versus 3.3 inches, you have a lot more runoff. And then, but even in a developed condition, this is one where you still have a lot of pavements, you can begin to mimic pre-development hydrology, and that's the goal of low-impact development. Would you like to take other questions on that? No. Okay. So moving on to the third-party review. So the third-party review was completed on today, and basically from as I read it, the remaining item for discussion is really about the soils and the number of test pits and all of that. What we would like to recommend is similar as to what we discussed last time, is that that you require in-place infiltration testing and confirmation of soil type for each trench. And that's pretty standard. We do that at a lot of projects, but it is actually beyond the requirements of DEP. DEP typically does not require inspection of that, although it is certainly good practice and something you always want to do. And the other part of that is we really believe that this part has been addressed. DEP would not have approved the project if they felt that the considerations of the test pits, soil types, etc., were of concern. And I think the combination of DEP's confidence, in addition to the infiltration testing and confirmation of soil type at each installation, I would hope would suffice for the board.
Well, we obviously, Joe continues to have some issues with this, and I think it's, I'm trying to go back to the discussion we had with you at the last session, where you did talk about developing a system that could perhaps integrate all of the trenches, and then you might be doing your testing. I think you were implying that you would do one and they'd be somewhat similar. I don't remember exactly, but let me just finish for a second.
Oh, sure, please.
But in the end, I mean, one of the things that hit me as I was looking at the plans was the areas where the soil testing was done was nowhere near where the trenches were.
It's true, but you don't need to do soil testing in the trenches. What you need, you have the option. There's 3 design approaches that are sufficient. One of them is to use the existing soil maps and the existing published rates. And then the other one is to do in-field testing and evaluation of the infiltration rate within that, so that you can do the dynamic sizing. The point of the infiltration testing is, and the dynamic sizing and the soil test pits are to confirm that we have the soils there that we think we do. And all we did was we took the NRCS maps, which the 2 dominant soil types are the Woodbridge and the Canton, I think. It's very simple, except I'll mix them up, I'm sure. But the Woodbridge, one of them is 0 to 8%, one of them is 8 to 15%. So all we did was go out in the field and verify, yep, it's Woodbridge, yep, it's Canton, and then remap it based on what was 0 to 8 and what was 8 to 15, because their mapping did not, would have been based on old topography that would have been, say, 40-foot contours or something like that. The contours that we work with now are 3-centimeter contours. So we can get very, very accurate, which is why our soil maps look like an intestine. But I think so the discussion that we'd had was that where the discrepancy between what Mr. Sorotka is saying and what we're suggesting is that technically you would want to have a test pit for each infiltration trench. And since we have, I can't remember how many it is, 29 infiltration trenches. Pardon? 29 infiltration trenches. We did not nor did we know where all of them would be. We did not do a test pit in each infiltration trench, but we did sufficient test pits for the equivalent square footage that would meet DEP requirements had it been one long continuous trench. And that's the basis for the approval, and that was the argument that we made all along with DEP. And so my suggestion, or I guess my alternate was that we could link all of the trenches and make it one big loop, and then we would have more than enough.
So, anybody want to pipe up about this thing? So I was reading, and maybe I better read what Joe has said in his last comment to you all, because it obviously can get technical, but we have two engineers who disagree.
Actually, we have 2 engineers, which would include the state, who believe it's sufficient, and 1 engineer, third-party review, who has.
Okay, that's fair, but he's our consultant.
He is, but this is under the DEP jurisdiction. And this
Can
is,
I say something, John?
Yeah.
So, actually, last Monday,
What's your name?
Rob and I, Steve Long from Borrego, Rob and I went to DEP and met with them on another issue, but we met with Tom McGuire and Phil DePietro, who reviewed this, and it was totally on something else, and they came up to Rob and said, that was an excellent job. So they reviewed it. There's 2 of them. They're like the stormwater gurus in the state. Tom McGuire is. He wrote the rules. He reviewed it, and he approved it. He reviewed it himself.
All right, so what we need to do, because we need to either have Joe call them and have a discussion with them, or sit down with you, because now the way this is reading, because we rarely get this kind of disagreement, where he's basically saying table the site criteria for infiltration trenches should be referenced instead. The soil testing criteria were noted above in my initial comment. I would continue to recommend that the board consider those requirements as conditions of approval. And I understand that DEP has approved it. Our concern is we want to make sure it works.
and my suggestion.
And I think that's why we've approached this thing. So
With all due respect, the letter that is in there, that was the comment from the Phil Christensen, covered this exact same issue. We're rehashing the issues that have been brought to the attention of DEP already.
And that's fine. Then I don't know that, because I don't.
I can show you. It's in the supplemental information.
But
And this was actually our fear, that he would start reviewing stuff that's out of what you asked him to do.
Because this is not in the special review criteria.
Correct.
I thought we were what we were doing was not to overlap with what DEP had done in the
That's
third-party
true.
review.
That's true, but our concern was that you were putting infiltration trenches in an area that was critical to the success of the project as far as we could tell. And all we were saying was that we want to make sure it works.
Sure. But
That's the basis
why
of it.
wouldn't the the evaluation of infiltration tests and confirmation of soil type for each trench be sufficient.
But I don't think that we have that.
Well, that's what's done in place. It's just like a septic system installation. When you excavate a septic system, you call out DEP, they come and evaluate it, and or you do the evaluation, they watch, and they evaluate
Says
the
a
material.
condition.
So,
Pardon?
Says a
It's
condition.
an order
You
of
guys-
conditions.
You guys come out,
so
review
my
as-
question is this different than what Joe was looking for? This proposed condition?
I don't know.
This
I don't
in
think it
place infiltration testing and confirmation.
Well, it
Is
sounds
there-
like they're referring to two different tables. I don't know what the difference in the criteria is from the two different tables, but I don't understand why, if you're doing infiltration tests on each trench as it gets constructed, and it works. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna, or you better not.
Yeah, I
You know,
mean,
say,
the-
oh, it doesn't work.
The
it won't
differential
work.
is that engineer, you are citing table 1B or IB1, and he's suggesting it ought to be IT1. Then
No,
I don't know what they are.
yeah, IB1 is infiltration basin, and IT1 is infiltration trench. And they're essentially identical. The difference is that a trench talks about the length of the trench as opposed to the total area. But this idea would be more than sufficient. This would give you 29 assessments of soil type, which is exactly what Mr. Sirwatka is asking for. And-
So,
and-
well, I didn't see that written. I didn't see that you were suggesting 29 separate ones.
Well, that's what it says on this
Oh.
soil here. It's
For
require
each,
in-place infiltration testing and confirmation for each trench.
Are you saying that you're going to do what Joe is suggesting, but you're going to do it as a part of
as an order of
construction?
condition, yes, that's part of construction, that's exactly right.
So is it, I mean,
Where's the issue?
is the difference here simply a timing matter? Because I know Joe's original
Well, the
comment stated that it should be done
Before.
after erosion control has been put in and at the outset of site work. So is that really the only fundamental difference between your position and his?
No, it would be in 100% agreement with that. My position is I don't feel that they need to be done prior to approval.
I don't think we would ever ask
no,
for that.
just as in sequencing.
Well, okay, then I think we're in agreement, because that's exactly what that's exactly what I'm suggesting. It would be at construction, it would be during construction. That's
I
exactly right.
think the concern was to make sure that it was early in construction as opposed to after tree clearing and everything had been done, so that things didn't go too far down the road.
That's exactly how people would be sequenced.
But it would be after tree clearing.
Yeah, it would be after, it'd definitely be after tree clearing. We've got to get in there and move around. You have to.
You would have to do that anyway, instead
So-
of
so-
29.
Rob, that comment you have here, did you make that comment to Joe, or he did not see that? Our recommendation is to require a place, or is that your response to his memo? So I'm just trying, again, I'm trying to figure out
It
what
was
crossed
discussed
here.
at the last meeting.
It was discussed at the last
Right,
meeting, yeah.
right,
I think that's in response to Joe.
okay.
Yeah. That's in, yeah.
Okay, I'm okay. So, having gone through all of Joe's stuff, I believe that you have answered all of the groundwater and other issues that related to his comments. Because he's saying no responses, or he has noted that all of the recommendations he made have been incorporated into the plans. The only thing which is out there in his comments, which we will get to anyway, is that you have a O&M for the vernal pools, but you have not yet done the vernal pool for the O&M for the facility. Am I right? The one that's in the application is from Brockelman and something.
I-
I think that was just a sample of.
Right.
But
this-
Rob did a more detailed one, that would be for the site. That was something that was submitted early on, as just a sample,
Right, that was
an
the
agreement.
wetlands.
That was for the wetlands, as opposed to the facility. I mean, the wetland is a good one, It's a very good one.
Yeah.
The O&M for the wetlands and habitat.
But it includes the,
Oh, let's go see.
yeah, it includes the panels.
After
Yeah.
special permit.
I hate it when it does that. It would be, I think
Do you
that's
know where it
appendix
is?
C, I believe. Well, yeah, that's right, appendix C. And not nearly that far either.
Back here?
Yeah, probably about page 30.
Oh. I thought I did not see that. I saw, here, up in, for the vernal.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're looking in the stormwater, in the special permit application.
Right.
I did not, I just put the title page in there for that, because it's in.
Right, this only has notice of lease.
Right, this has the entire piece in there. It's in the, it's in this one.
In the stormwater,
Yeah.
but it's not in here.
It's part of the submittal to DEP. Here it is, it's appendix C of the O&M plan. And
Let me just see.
includes, so it includes system electrical inspections.
Yeah, no,
and
it is,
maintenance,
okay.
lighting, source control.
But, and then, okay, fine. So you had it in the stormwater and not in the application. It's all right.
Well, they were submitted together, so.
So- Okay. Okay, so then all of Joe's things have been answered.
I believe so.
Okay. The other things that you guys, you want to continue?
Yes, there's a few other pieces I would like to just show you real briefly here. So this is the tree clearing plan. Joe had asked, and these were great suggestions, and actually, no, this was your suggestions. This was just the sequence of tree clearing. So we've added how all the various pieces will proceed with respect to road improvements, bridge installation, tree clearing, etc. And as part of that, a traffic plan was developed, including evaluation of turning radius and the need for road improvements. And so a note has been added to the plan that any damage to the road will be replaced to the owner's satisfaction, including the town. And there will be a slight modification to the driveway here to accommodate the turning traffic. And what we end up with is the above mentioned work will occur over an estimated 4 months with an average of 3 trucks per day. Logging is anticipated to last for 4 months, no, I should say 4 weeks, with an average of 5 trucks per day.
Have you all seen this? The details of this. I mean, I think it's a good plan. Anybody have any comments on it? No? I know? Okay.
Grading and erosion control, again, these were some good suggestions from Joe. It was about the sequencing and to be sure that the installation of the infiltration trenches occurred prior to the panel installation. So essentially all the trenching, any site work would be done and the site stabilized prior to the, or sorry, not necessarily stabilized, but the erosion control measures in place prior to installation of the panels themselves. So that has been adjusted accordingly. In addition, the installation of the.
So that is taken from the plan, is that what that?
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's right off of the plan.
Okay.
So a revised drainage plan, some fairly minor edits. There were some places where the erosion control had been inside of the trenches. Now the erosion controls essentially are, as they should have been, are at the limit of clearing, and all the infiltration trenches are within that location. so that there would be no activity outside of the limit of clearing or outside of erosion control. The revegetation plan, so this was a minor change here. And this is the replacement of the arborvitae with the native species. This is against our recommendation, but this is to be responsive to the neighbors who prefer the native species here. So with that, we've got the white pine, the eastern red cedar, and then the pitch pine are in here.
What is pitch pine? I'm not that familiar with it. I'm a big fan of arborvitae because it's the best screening evergreen that's out there.
I would
So I'm
agree.
not sure if I concur with your making those changes. I just think that they could be interspersed in such a way that they wouldn't, I think I understand what you guys are getting at on that they're not native or they're not natural, because you usually see an arborvitae fence and it's pretty rigid. But it seems to me that you could put arborvitae and mix them with white pine and other kinds of pines and it would be quite effective. So I'd like to hold out on that and see or get other, what do you think, Peter?
Well, I think you did this to address the concerns of the abutters.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I did, but I do think it will be less effective. I think their arborvitae are, I mean, they're dense, they're fast growing, and the, white pine, has a lot of limbs as they go up, but not nearly as dense. But it's really just to be responsive, so.
While you have this up, because I wanted to bring it up at another time, but since this is a good graphic.
Oh, I've got some good graphics for you, Peter.
So, the other, you responded to DEP and moved some arrays and racks from the
That's right.
northeast side.
We eliminated a few in here.
And then you
a few on
moved
the other
them,
side.
and then you moved them to this side.
That's
where
right,
you-
some were also moved over here, that's right.
Right. And so, I think you should move them, and I don't think you should have put them there. I think you've got 16 or 17 racks that you move from one side to the other, and you put them really right in front of the neighborhood. And I think that's a mistake. And I think you should move them someplace or get rid of them.
What do you want to do? Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's gonna scare it again.
Again.
I don't know what that is.
It's the doomsday clock.
It's
Getting louder and louder.
giant hourglass of sand telling me to get moving. Across. What did we do last time? We did this.
When we went to the site where government is going to build the house for the static, that was a big deal.
Oh,
I learned that back then.
so there wasn't much at eye level.
All right.
I think it's terrible for screening.
Terrible for screening.
As it ages, maybe when it's brandy new,
Yeah.
it's
Right,
kind
right,
of
right,
screening.
right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is better.
Do you want to speak to this, Steve?
Sure. I'm just looking at what the numbers are. Yeah.
I mean, I think when I looked at it before, you moved 17
So
from and got a plus of 60. There they are. Something like that.
those are the ones we got rid of to get to where we are.
Right.
This would be, no, this would be the proposed.
Okay, so without the red is where we are now, which we moved from DEP. So, can you take that off?
Yeah.
So this is where we are now.
No, this is what we would propose. This would be,
So, where's the red?
the red's been removed.
Okay. So, this system with the red,
This is the current configuration, and the red is what we could remove.
that's what we could remove. We could eliminate 19 racks by changing from a 370 watt module to a 400 watt module. That way we're not gonna be the exact number. they
Using
show.
more efficient.
They're a more efficient module,
Right.
and we can do that. They're available, and the number's not gonna be exact, it's what's on the top of the plan. I think if you multiply it out, it's a little bit different, but it's gonna be around 2.8 megawatts.
Mhm.
And the key is actually the AC wattage, because that's what ties into the utility, and it's a 1.4 factor, so it's a 2 megawatt into the utility, so it's the same. So we're gonna put more efficient modules out, and we can eliminate the modules in the locations that are optioned in red.
So I want to make sure, do you understand that?
Yes.
You get it?
So what you see there is what we've currently proposed. You've requested the reduction, and so what we could do is we could reduce all the items in red. And what that would do, that would eliminate 19 racks, would increase the distance from the abutters to 466 feet. There would be 11.9 acres of clearing, which is a half an acre less, and 1,576 trees cleared, which is 64 less than current. And it would look like this instead.
Can you go back to the previous one?
Yeah.
So the racks that you're removing on the right, okay? If you left those in play, and you,
Excuse me, I'm right, you can't, that's DEP's requirement?
no,
They're now.
Yeah, so,
That's the reason why we're just getting further away from the sensitive areas.
Good,
because
gotcha,
we knew that,
gotcha.
And that's where
But you're right.
so
Right.
if you
We
were
can
to
move the 19 wherever, yeah. That's
so
right.
if you were to leave those in play,
Mhm.
where they're at, and instead of taking them out of the right side, if you could take them out from the high point where they're being taken from
Highest
the left
point.
side.
Yeah.
You know, so because the whole thing is, when it comes to seeing this thing visually, the highest point is what's gonna be seen. So if you can remove those from the equation, you're gonna have a better chance of making this palatable from not
Right.
being seen.
Right, so what they have to be, they have to be, we have to pick apart, it's probably right here, and they have to be adjacent to each other, obviously, we
Right.
can only take from the end in,
Right.
but we can move the 19 around.
So,
Yeah.
This is what we were proposing, to stay away from a sensitive DEP area, maybe move further away and the abutters. But if we want to do it just all on the left,
And you've already got your
that's
DEP
fine.
approval with those in place.
If you've already got DEP approval with those in
Right.
place, put them over to the left.
Yeah,
So you'd have 4, 8,
16 or so?
9, so it would be, almost be this row right in here.
Or whatever the highest point is.
Yep.
that is the highest one.
Yeah, I think it is, that's a
Yeah.
78 foot.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing we talked about last time, that the height here is 78 feet.
And I want to show you this too, because
So that
you're going to
helps
feel a
with
little
screening.
better about this too. So
Yeah.
as far as the screening, so we were asked to revise the cross-section. And so this has been done. We've provided a number of reference lines for line of sight from both 5 and 6 Courtney Drive, decks and the top of screening. And this is what it looks like. So not very easy to see, but I tried to put some colors on to make it a little bit easier. But this is 6 Courtney Drive. This is the valley in between. This is those panels, which could now potentially be removed. We have the blue line is the deck elevation at 5 Courtney Drive.
Blue,
The blue line, yep. And the green line is the top of the screening trees. Okay, so they're right in here. And the red line is the line of sight from 6 Courtney Drive at elevation 81. And the purple line is the line of sight from 5 Courtney Drive at elevation 82. So here's the top of your screening trees. Here's at elevation 87. So you've got a 5-foot minimum there. I know it's a little hard to read, so what I want to do, I just zoom in on one section here. What you have here is those same lines. Blue is the deck elevation of 5 Courtney Drive.
What is that deck height?
77. And red is the line of sight from 6 Courtney Drive deck. And purple, which you can't tell it's purple because it's under this range of view, is the line of sight from 5 Courtney Drive, which is this line here. And then green is the top of the screening trees, and then there's this wedge, which is taken as if it were a line of sight from, so it goes flat, and then out to the top of the tree, which is the top of the screening trees here, and just extends up. So it's slightly, it's 5 feet here, but it's going to be slightly higher than that, closer to around 7 feet above the panels from the line of sight. So with that,
Martha, can you email that to us?
Sure.
sure.
No, did we get it?
We have.
Oh, it's in this?
Yes, it's in,
Okay, thank you.
although not in coloring like you provided.
Go back to the broader one if you could, because I think this does go back to, obviously, the major concerns that we raised last time was we didn't think that the screening would be effective, what you were showing, because of the sight lines. We had recommended you look at putting it on the highest property you have. I think it maybe moved it a little bit. Did you move it a bit? I don't know.
No, the only thing, there were a couple, it was a little bit off, but the main thing that has moved here is that the location of the fence was wrong. The location of the fence was closer to the screening trees, but it's pretty close to where it was
Okay.
anyhow.
Okay.
So it really hasn't changed much.
But, so for example,
What actually changed most was the addition of the 10-foot trees.
okay.
Because
So
initially
what-
those were 3 to 4, or 6
Got
to
it.
8.
But what about putting those 10-foot trees closer to the black onyx fence, and wouldn't they provide better screening in that location? That looks like it's about 2 or 3 feet higher.
Yep, that could definitely
See what
happen.
I mean? Just
Yep.
shifting that around a bit when you get out there in the field,
Sure.
just doing that, I think, responds to
So-
the concerns that we've continued to have.
I say, does this
So those
reflect
panels-
those panels?
That doesn't,
It's
that's
not
that's a
reflective
curve.
of feet gone.
Yeah.
Right, so
We're gonna,
you can
Okay,
even peel it
okay,
back
fine.
and fro.
Got it.
Yeah, it's even, yeah.
So we need a new drawing.
Okay.
once you get past that high point, it's pretty flat.
So
So
all of this would
So
get
take
moved
it away
in
off the high
probably
point,
to
and
about
it
here.
flattens out a bit?
Yep.
Yeah.
So where the trees are now is probably the best spot, because it drops from there.
Okay,
so.
all right.
Or-
So you'll adjust that, right?
We would
You'll
adjust
take
that.
a-
And we'll make sure they're on the
All right.
highest point there.
Well, that goes a long way in my mind. You guys?
That's good.
And what's the maximum panel that you can, for production you can get?
400.
400?
That's what we can get now, it's changing, but I can tell you that's what we can get
So
now.
next week it'll be 425, you think?
Well, it depends, if the permitting process goes on for 2 more years, like when they initially started, it would probably be at 450 by then.
Honestly, we can't change it like that easily.
Do you have options for the color of the underside of the panels?
No.
What do they come as?
It's gray.
Gray.
Or
Okay.
white. It's a
White
lighter color.
white would be bad, but gray would be okay.
Different models have different back colors.
I'm just trying to think of an extra way to reduce the potential of being able to see these things. I mean, I'm looking at multiple ways of reducing the impact. And I haven't gone to your other facility to look at what that is.
Yeah. And I can't guarantee that they'll be the same modules, I really
So,
can't. Just
that's
because
what
they
I'm
added the tariff to the modules, so now it's hard to get them. And I know, like, if I say we're gonna use 400s, we're gonna use 400s, not gonna. We used 370s, and that was a while ago, but the tariff happened like.
Well, I guess we'd appreciate you taking a look at it and let us know.
Yeah, I know 400s, that's a definite possibility, and that gets rid of 900s.
And if those are all the ones that are closest to the home,
Correct.
everything else doesn't matter. Right?
That's
How
right.
much more room does that
It's,
provide?
each rack is about 30 feet wide. Yep. So you're gaining 60 feet approximately on that side.
Okay.
Okay, so the last items that we had were, so we had that, and then just some detail issues. We'd still shown a barbed wire fence, some issue with the road base, and those have all been revised. So, we would like to suggest, humbly suggest, that the board consider voting on the application, given that the third-party review essentially leaves all the remaining items as order of conditions. With that,
Thank you very much. I just want to go over a
Thank you for
couple
your
of the things that you, that we have before us. You've presented your mowing plan and additional information on the conservation restriction as is drawn up is not finalized. Katie, were you we've been told or heard rumors that you were considering increasing the acreage or not, or is that still in the offing or not?
No, it's still there.
Okay.
We're meeting with them Sunday, actually, to the people that are, it would be Greenbelt that we're having a conversation with. It's just one.
So you are talking to Greenbelt?
We are talking.
Okay.
So we're meeting with them Sunday.
Mr. Chairman?
No, so so if that's the case, we have an issue here. And so why don't you explain it to everybody?
Well, just so that folks know, I am on the acquisition committee for the Essex County Greenbelt, and so it shouldn't really matter for this thing. If anything, I'm going to have to recuse myself from the
Not the-
decision at Essex County Greenbelt.
But not
because of
for
my
the entire.
position here,
Right.
because it really doesn't matter who will hold the easement, someone will,
Yeah.
regardless of whether it's Essex County or not. But just so you know.
Do you have to file a disclosure for that?
Pardon?
I don't know, do you have to file a disclosure for that?
You should file a disclosure.
Yes.
And she's making it public by making this announcement now.
Right. Yeah, I found out about 2 hours ago, so.
Isn't it fun?
Yeah.
And so Paul has looked at this, but some time ago, but I guess maybe after you've had your discussions with Greenbelt, you could then update
Ultimately, that's going to be
a condition.
something that's going to be a condition of approval.
Yeah, because it does, as you know, it does take time. There's some
Sure.
forms that we have to work out with them. They have a process that they go through.
Right, in fact, it may be significantly different than, the form that was submitted, because if you're going through the Greenbelt and the state for the approval of the restriction, they have a pretty standard form.
They do, they have a standard form that we're working, again,
You want
we're
more
meeting with them,
substantial, it's in that.
they wanna, basically wanna walk the property, talk about the form, talk about the additional land. That needs to go to, as you were implying, that it has to go to their acquisition board. They have to make some decisions there. Once they make that decision, then you fill out the forms, it goes to the state, gets approved by the town. I mean, there's a process there, so we're starting the process, and we'll hope to get this done.
one other quick thing I'd like to add, this is more anecdotal, but in the meeting we had with DEP regarding another project, I brought up the question of this proposed project as it is with the 50-some acres of land conservation versus the 35 or 40 acres that's developable. And they without hesitation, felt that this was a very good project and from an ecological standpoint, far superior to the residential development or something like that could occur. So meaning that there would be additional wetland impacts because they would be allowed wetland crossings to get to the other forested uplands and all of those things. So they were supportive of it.
Okay. You would also, at the end of your response to Joe's stuff, you did have the requested revisions that we had, the board had made, or the community. And I think that you have answered them all, in particular noting that that 554-day lease term was wrong. That was the term of option, and I'm going back to look at it. You're absolutely right. And then Martha, did you get a chance to look at all these things on the next page? The revised special permit, the various planning, the plans themselves?
I did, and I did have a couple of questions. I think the first one, and the septic systems were added. I had a question about the tree clearing plan. With the phasing, you say that you're going to be clearing from north to south, but the access road is on the south. I was just a little confused about why it was going to be done that way.
We're going to build the road all the way out to the north end of the site and then work our way from the furthest point back.
Back down the road?
Yes.
Okay. I noticed there was one, note 23, I think it was on sheet C30. And this is just a minor detail, but it's still mentioning planting blue spruces. So that's...
Won't go away. It won't go away.
And then your last one, which I will get over when we go through our detailed analysis, but was your submittal, oh, wait a minute, no, your decommissioning costs. What happened to those? Did I leave them with you?
No, it's in here, and then Paul had sent us, which I have here, information that he...
Because we did go over this, and what I was intrigued with was that
I gave that to you.
the costs varied considerably. I mean, some of them went up and some of them went down, but the overall cost of decommissioning went down as opposed to went up. And our concern was that they were supposed to go up.
I think it went up a little bit.
No.
No, they went from 109 to 130 to 109. So I'd like another look at that, because I think you had forgotten the 125%, which was in the first estimate.
Okay. But
So if you-
I remember looking at it, and when I looked at it, it had gone up, so I'm surprised.
No, it's...
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, it's in here, isn't it? It's in the,
The original one's in there.
is it in the application? Because that's where I wrote it earlier.
Well, what was the total overall cost after 20 years in the first one we did?
Oh, hold on. Wait. Tabs would help in the future.
115 is the new one. And it's appendix N.
So can I just ask, $28 an hour 20 years from now?
Well, it's current cost. So we add
okay.
inflation rate
Okay.
to get the 20-year cost.
Okay.
And another thing, I know you guys won't allow it, but there's salvage costs to some of the items that get removed, and we have been allowed to add salvage costs. I did not add it here. It'd probably be 30 grand. So if we were allowed to bring that and get it salvaged, we could recoup that cost. So I'm not including that in here.
Now, the original was 130,755, and the second one, which I just can't, do you have it?
Yep.
Is 113,732.
Well, to tell you the truth, there's a lot less racks that we have to take out, and that's part of decommissioning. We removed 19, we removed a lot, and that's part of decommissioning, so that's honestly why the price goes down.
And just,
We've removed a lot of panels. We'll remove 19 racks, each rack holds 30 panels. So when you consider that as part of the cost,
So-
it's
Let's
gonna
go back to the original.
So 253 racks.
So we now have 7562 solar panels, 200. Cost for removing the panels remain the same. So removing the panels and remove wiring remain the same. Dismantle racks went down. And
You've got a lot less clearing area than you originally had. So there's items, we made the system smaller.
And didn't you also say that your estimates now are more accurate?
Yeah, they're more accurate, but I think we made the system smaller in the end, from where we started out. So, that's the cost there that decreased.
so whose estimates, well, again, our concern is to leave the town not holding the bag 20 years from now. In our criteria, it says we are able to require a independent estimate. And I'm not sure how the board thinks about that. Are we okay with all this? Or do we want to have somebody else come and do an estimate?
Do we know right now anyone who could do it?
I don't know.
You don't know either.
There really aren't any. I've done it for other towns, and this is the form that I use for other towns. This is probably my 20th one, so.
So is the plan to definitely decommission at 20 years?
Well, there's an option after 20.
Right.
That
So,
can- yeah.
So, 20 years, the viability of the product to collect the energy diminishes.
Substantial.
Right. So, at 20 years, is the thought that you bring in new technology?
No. It probably won't fit on the racks, so you wouldn't.
Mhm.
So we don't know if it would happen in 20 years, or 25 years, or 30 years.
15.
Right. It's an option to the landowner that he continues to lease.
But it will be a minimum of 20.
Correct.
Did someone just say 15?
It's 20.
Well, I'm concerned about it, but I mean, if board members aren't jumping through hoops,
But as far as evaluation,
yeah.
we can always lower our requirements, we can't increase them. On the article, we can say we'll waive that. Article 14 requirement for independent
Right,
evaluation, we can waive that independent if we have to, if there's no one out there.
yeah.
Paul, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we do have what I submitted to Martha, which was costs from other towns.
Oh, I'm sorry, is that what this is?
Yes.
I didn't see this.
So I think that, you could, obviously, we don't have a great deal of information with regard to these, but we do have the size and we do have the amounts that, the decommissioning that was imposed.
So we can do extrapolation.
We have an average here, yeah. Take a look at sort of what the sizes are and if the rates are in the same ballpark.
All right, let's do that, thank you, this is very helpful.
Yeah, so Stowe Acton, which is similar size, 2.8 is 168,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we will look at this stuff and we'll either keep it or we'll ask you to increase it. I mean, based
Yeah, and
on
I'm
the other
totally-
examples,
I'm
okay?
totally fine, and I think that's what other towns have done, is to take an average.
Okay,
And we're totally fine with that if you, I don't know if you want to make a condition, but I'm not
Okay.
opposed to your method.
and the only other thing that we have, I think that's part of what Joe was talking about, and is the issue of the value of the trees, but I want to do that later when we go over the criteria. So, neighborhood folks, what I think we're going to do is this, that we would like to entertain any comments and input that you guys have at this point in time. After which we, depending on the time, sit down and start to go through our decision criteria. Okay?
You want to go first? You want me to go first?
Why don't you go first and I will jump on your.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there's some things that have changed. I'm really sure about Big Courtney Drive, and here is peanut butter. That's all right, I can just put it on the bowl. So this is the project that was before us in 2014, when it first came. It's been reduced some, it's been moved some, and now I just heard that it's gonna be reduced again. We don't know how much, we don't know where, we don't know what it's gonna look like. True or false?
Smaller.
So I was a little taken aback by the fact that there was a second plan, like, within 2 seconds. Oh, well, I guess we're gonna do that, so I'm kinda wondering what's behind door number 3. Is there even a smaller plan? How much smaller could this possibly go? I'm not quite sure what the topography is of this, but if I remember, and it's been a very long time, there was a hill here, and I don't know, and maybe Katie, you can answer this question. Is the plan to put all the arrays now on the other side of that hill so that they won't be seen at all?
No, it was just to remove that row or now maybe 2 rows.
All right, so
Right, so-
is the planning
Hold
board
on,
gonna
hold
get a
on,
whole
I'm
nother
gonna answer your
plan?
question. That row of red would go away, and that same row of red would be brought to the other side, so that row of red would basically be twice as wide. It would represent 2 panels, two rows of panels.
So the row on the right is gonna widen?
No.
No.
It's gonna become a,
This is gonna stay the same, this is gonna stay there.
Yeah.
And these right here in red
Yeah?
are gonna be removed, then the next one over. So 2 on this side.
Are gonna get moved?
That's
They're gonna be
removed.
Out there.
Removed.
Totally removed.
From that
But
tail.
I can tell you, there's nothing behind door number 3. We can't get more than 400, more efficient models than 400. I cannot.
So you said you couldn't get any more efficient than this one?
This
process
process
has been going on for like 3 years.
No kidding.
So it changes, it's not gonna go for another 3. I can get 400s now, it's really limited what you can get because of the tariff that happened recently. I don't know if you've seen that in the news, but it's really tough to get anything. So when we can get 400s, we're not gonna get anything more. I can tell you it's not gonna change.
So can you again show me which ones are gonna go?
You know what I'll do?
These
What?
here,
I'll adjust it, and then she can keep going with her presentation. and
so
I'll-
like that, I mean, it's gonna be like that. So
So,
it's, for
okay.
right here, it's gonna move over approximately 60 feet.
All right, you know what you can do instead of that, because I'll have another plan. Can you put up the,
No, not yet. I'm answering the last question first.
So disrespectful.
so the drone footage that you guys saw where last time, I was thinking about that. And I know they have a landscape plan, but I don't understand how they can intersperse the plants, the trees, amongst what's in there
you mean,
without cutting down
amongst the
trees.
existing vegetation?
Yeah,
I guess you can answer that, Steve, but
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't.
easy.
Yeah.
What you would do is you would access by the road, the plant's not up there now, you could access by the access road with the plantings on a large truck and take a bobcat out around the fence and move them to areas, there's room between those trees to plant them. It's gonna have to be a few at a time that you can carry over there, but that's how you do it. You use small machines.
What's
You
your
use a mini
concern?
excavator
What's your
and a
concern?
bobcat.
Is that
I don't
there's no room to do it?
I don't think there is. I think the wetlands are there, I think it encroaches on the property line, and, I mean, it may change now with these panels being gone,
Right.
but
I guess I've never had, I mean, you walk it, or I've walked it twice now, or 3 times. And that question never entered my mind.
Well,
Just
it came
never
to me
did.
when I saw the drone flight over. I'm like, and I asked Martha the question, I'm like, how can they intersperse? And she said that's very good.
Well, here's the point too, if it's too dense and we can't put it in,
Good.
we need it.
That's a question that we don't know.
We're gonna put it in the areas that's gonna fit, because there's an opening that needs to be screened.
What happens when this project goes in? Now, I think now that it's been cut back, it might be a little bit different, but what happens when it's built and you can see it?
They have to fix it.
They have to fix it.
What if they can't fix it?
They can fix it.
They can fix it.
Plant it.
The criteria is, from day one, it has to be screened. I'm not, how we're gonna write up this decision, but it has to be done. And so if it's not, they have to fix it.
And they understood that all along, 3 years ago.
Where my angst is that I haven't seen any, I mean, the last special permit that I was a part of, they had a landscape architect there. We were told there was gonna be an arborist that's gonna help and deal with the soil plantings. I mean, I think Rachel, and I'm not quite sure about you, Peter, you weren't here in when all the promises that were made.
I did watch it.
Did you watch the one from the 15th?
I did.
Okay,
You sent
thank
it
you.
out, I watched it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Long and painful. So but you have, I'm done.
No, let me do, before you sit, because we did talk about an arborist, and they did come back with a plan from an arborist and a landscape architect. That was so long ago that we have forgotten it.
There was never a landscape architect and there was never an arborist.
Yeah, I thought the guy from Corliss is a landscape architect.
He never came up with a plan.
I thought they did, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, he asked him what kind of trees to plant.
Well,
Well, we worked with them, and we also had a consultant pick out the trees, and he looked at the soils. He's a wetland scientist, and he knows, he's a soil scientist also, so he looked at the plantings that are there and picked out plants. Our original
Yeah,
plan
I
for this
spoke to
submission
that.
had,
so
Had
I
these
have no
plantings.
problem in having as a condition that the planning board through Martha work with a landscape architect to ensure that the plantings are the right ones. I mean, it's just not, that's what we should do.
I'd like to hear you
And
go
we'll,
through.
condition that.
I'd like to hear you go through the special permit criteria, because Matt, the wetland specialist that you hired, he said that currently there is a very large expanse of intact ecological habitat, meaning there are very few interruptions of the habitat in the area. The project goes into the middle of an ecological intact habitat, and over time impacts similar to a pebble hitting a windshield, creating a tiny chip which will create a crack, slowly diminishing the quality of the surrounding habitat. There are not a lot of very large intact expanses of good mature forest from the 128 corridor out, similar to what is found here. Habitat does not exist in a vacuum. This site is surrounded by great mature forest, diverse wetlands and streams. Wildlife gains its value from a diversity of types which is found here. And one of the criteria that you guys have to, one of the findings is the proposed use and development will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any natural feature of significant importance. So this habitat does not exist in a vacuum. This site is surrounded by a great mature forest, diverse wetlands and streams. This particular wildlife habitat gains value from its diversity of types which is found here on this site. And there are not a lot of very large expanses of good mature forest from 128 out. And destruction of this forest, I believe, does not come to, it doesn't fall under that finding. So, I mean, I've told you, I'll submit this to you, this is here too. The Appendix A from the DEP, which looked at wetland impacts of the project. I don't ever remember seeing that. All I've ever seen is a wildlife impact study of the upland piece. This project is going to impact, punching a hole in this is going to impact every single one of our properties around Courtney Drive over time. That's what the wildlife consultant testified to you. That's what he said. It's going to have impact. And I think putting this, like Marlene Schroeder said, it is environmentally irresponsible to clear cut this much forest to generate power. I don't care how clean the power is. It belongs on the brown field. And that's all I have to say. Anybody else want to say something?
Yeah.
Ask about the
The question I have is, that might be a I'm not speaking
Name and
Right,
address, name and address, please.
my name and
Name and
address.
address.
Maybe he didn't say anything. He's been talking, he didn't say a word. He didn't say his name.
Dan, just say.
Name and address.
I know, but I mean,
Go ahead.
Say it.
all right, Dan McCarthy, 5 Courtney Drive. I happened to get, the coincidence of this came up that I got my National Grid bill today. Right, I said, geez, I started going over it and I look at it. And I think a question that we asked the last meeting, or the one I watched on TV, was that what benefit is it gonna be for the town? Right, I mean, I didn't hear that answer yet. I didn't hear that thing being answered. And so I'm looking at this thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, where is this wonderful energy going to? Do we know what town this is going to? Not going to Newbury, right?
I don't know.
Does anybody have that answer?
It goes into the grid.
Goes where in the grid? It doesn't come to Newbury?
Anywhere. It goes that's where any energy goes, it goes into the grid, and then whoever owns that portion of the grid sells it. So it can come from anywhere and be sold anywhere. Your energy can come
So
from
you're
Canada.
connecting to those high tension wires over there,
Nope.
right then?
We don't really connect.
Where do you connect to?
The distribution line, which is right next to it.
Well, that's what I mean, those high tension wires,
No,
right?
ours are lower. Ours are 40 feet high. It's the 3-phase that's in the same easement as the high tension.
So that's a whole, all right. Well, whatever, I don't understand that part of it, but I'm going over to these charges, you know, you hear about, you know, National Grid, they want to raise every year, and, oh yeah, you know, Attorney General says, no, you can't do it. But this is how they raise their prices, when they got all these other little things that they have here. Well, I see this one thing, it says distant charge, $57. That's a month. That's a month. Now, he's saying it's going somewhere else, it's not coming to Newbury, the township and all our town people, let's multiply that times 12 months, 12 months, 57, $50, let's make simple arithmetic, no, $600 a year, right? Okay, so I don't know if you live here, you're paying $600, you're paying, how much money is this thing here gonna give the town? $10,000 a year, that's what I was hearing. That's minute compared to this number. Minute for the next 20 years, that number is nowhere near this number. I mean, we go with more charges, transmission charge, $27.96. What is that? I don't even know what it is. But the distant charge, they're charging a distant charge because wherever that grid that you're talking about, is it in Everett that we get the thing from, on that big power plant that's out there in Everett? I don't know. But I mean, it's coming out of this wonderful energy source that we're getting here in Byfield. It's not, you're not benefiting, if you live in this town, none of us are benefiting from it. It's just, I mean, I hope there's a lot of viewership tonight. And they can, you know, let them look at their bill too. Just, it's coincidence, I just got it today. And I'm saying, distant charge, well, if we were getting this here, we wouldn't have a distant charge, would we? Maybe a little bit, you know, but I mean, that's what, $57, that's every month. That if you live here, you're paying it too. I mean, it was supposed to get, I thought last week, the last meeting, they were talking about the criteria on this thing here was, we want a benefit that we're gonna get from Byfield and Newbury.
We did ask them that, and they submitted.
That was a big thing, right? And what was it? What did they come up with? It's gonna be green space, so we're gonna be able to walk around this thing if we want? Is that what that's gonna be?
The
Green belt, we'll be able to walk around it?
What was submitted was that they'd be paying property taxes. They have not yet worked out an agreement with the town administrator as to what those taxes would be. They indicated they'd be making a payment on a tree replacement, that they would be donating 70 acres of land for permanent conservation. And I'm trying to think what else. But the other thing was, in fact, screening the facility itself. I'm not sure if I'm missing something.
But isn't there some money, wasn't there gonna be some, that was the whole thing, over 20 years, like 10, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I thought I heard a number.
No, taxes.
$10,000, so $10,000 a year they're gonna pay.
No,
I think it was 30,000.
no.
$30,000?
I think that
How much is it?
that estimate is based on what you did on Middle Road. And it's not clear that that's what's going to be the.
So we don't know what that number
We
is.
don't know what it is.
Okay.
So.
They haven't worked.
So you might possibly approve this thing without knowing that number?
Well, it's going to be at least 34,000,
$34,000 a year.
right?
So 20 years is what, 600,000?
something like that.
Yeah, so this $57 in 20 years is gonna be 157 or 257, right? That everybody's gonna be paying for this distance charge that I'm talking about.
Oh, I don't know what the distance charge is.
Well, I know, but, I mean, maybe, you know, because I just got it here, I'd
Maybe
love to
only
have.
you get it.
Well, you're right, I mean, I just got it today. I'd like to get a National Grid expert, some of those guys that make six figures, maybe can answer all these questions that, all these different charges that they charge me. I mean, I can't believe it when I actually look at it, but, there's a basic service is $115, so everybody pays $115. I mean, that's, you know, just a, you know, turn on your light over here, $115 a month. I mean, but the 57, it's just amazing to me for a distance charge. So, but that's what that's all about, right? You guys know about that, right? I mean, that's what it means about distance,
I
right?
have no idea what it means.
You don't, oh, so, well, okay, so I don't know if this is gonna go on again. I am gonna find out what all these charges and what,
Okay,
is it gonna be?
that'd be helpful.
Does
I really
it
don't
sound
know.
like it is I mean, if it's right in our backyard, it doesn't sound like it's an advantage for the town of Newbury, right? If it's going somewhere else. If what it generates, if this electricity is going somewhere else and not coming to Newbury, would you agree to that?
Well, I don't know that it's not, but I don't know that, I don't know that it can't. I don't know that some Newbury residents
Well,
can't benefit from it.
let's go back to the fact that you're gonna,
Who's buying it? Great National Grid, right?
The system,
he doesn't even know.
it's going into Grid's system.
But I mean, so nobody really knows. And you're gonna prove something that nobody even
Yeah, it's-
knows about any of this.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
Why don't we just clear all the trees in park?
So the only benefit really is the
The next meeting,
taxes.
I'll have some answers for this. I mean, maybe I gotta get a hold of somebody that's making six, you know, it's one of these guys that makes six figures that can answer these things.
A good place to begin is the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities.
Yeah, because I mean, you probably don't look at your bill either, right? You just pay it. That's what we do, right? I mean, I just happen to look at it. I'm saying,
I track it,
I do.
track it every
But I've
day.
never
you check
seen
it,
the distance
but you
charge.
can't answer those questions though.
That's
You
not
just, so
my-
you're not really
We're
checking.
just talking about the benefits, right now it's taxes
It's a total of
only.
$110.
But it's not even taxes, it's something, what's it
These
called?
charges,
Pilot or something.
these charges that they have here that nobody seems to know, there's $110 a month.
Track.
All these
Just on
charges.
one thing.
The Public Utilities Commission will tell you how to figure that.
Yeah,
They
But-
set the rates.
but my point being, you guys are thinking about pondering whether you're gonna accept this thing or not, and we don't even know. Nobody even can answer these questions, I mean,
It really is not part of our,
it's not part of it. You
Part
just-
of our
It's not an advantage,
responsibility.
we're looking for advantages that
It's,
we're gonna get from Byfield,
we
and
have
Newbury.
our responsibility is to the land and to the zoning, and we don't really
Not-
look at
not
rates.
that- I thought it was,
We don't really look at rates and rate charges.
okay, you don't look at the rates, but I mean, would you think that this would be an advantage to the township? Or that he doesn't know, they don't know where this,
You mean if
this electricity's gonna
if it
go
was
to
clear
Lowell or
that
somewhere
Newbury
else,
residents
it
were
doesn't
getting
get
it,
a
yes, that
disadvantage.
would be an advantage. It would be.
yeah,
It would be an advantage.
yeah, so, you know, the next meeting I get, unless it gets approved or disapproved before that time, I'll find out.
Okay, thanks.
You know, I just wanted to mention about the decommissioning thing. I saw
It's crazy.
one of these projects went in, I think it was in Medfield, and one of the conditions of approval was that the town would look at every 5 years. They looked at the cost to adjust,
No, we have it in ours.
It's Article 4.
It's in our bylaw.
that you have to look at it every 5.
It has to be adjusted every 5 years. Okay.
Julie Duncan, 6 Courtney Drive. So when, in the red that you're gonna take out, does that also mean that the fence is going to move farther away from the property line? Okay, because my property line is still a lot closer than 416 feet, 66 feet, which is a lot closer than your dwelling. Also, I don't know if this is a question for the board or for them. What does having the greenbelt hold the conservation versus the town conservation mean to the town revenue? And does it? I don't know, that's a question.
No, I mean, the taxes will remain on KB's property, as far as we can tell, and your mother's, grandmother's, in a similar way that it's taxed today, as far as I can tell. So there's no tax, isn't that what Michelle said?
Yeah, from what she told me, unless Essex County Greenbelt were to acquire it in fee, which is not part of the discussion here, it won't be taxed any differently with a conservation restriction on it than it is right now.
Okay, and also in town, I know in a previous world I lived in, if you had your conservation property was taxed at a lower rate than your, it was assessed differently in your property taxes.
Explain that.
Right.
Is it, and so would there be, the town would lose revenue from that too, or would that be put into the pilot?
Now, again, from what the principal assessor told me, for a residential property, the first acre is assessed at full value with a house on it, and then the rest of it is considered excess land. And so that determination as excess land is not going to change whether it has the conservation restriction or not. There are subtractors for topography and for wetlands and things like that, and that won't change.
My concern is, you know, that there's revenue to Borrego and to KB on this end, and where is the town benefit? Because the neighborhood benefit and the real estate market on our assessments and things like that in terms of resale value will definitely be decreasing, so I just want to make sure that the town will receive some sort of compensation for the pilot and everything else, and that we're not losing revenue while others are gaining.
We will not be. Anyone else from the community want to say anything? Anyone else from Borrego or KB want to say anything? With that, I am going to, what language do I want to use here to close the?
Well, I think the first question you want to ask, is there any additional information that you're going to want to see before closing the hearing? Or do you think that anything that was discussed tonight would appropriately be the subject of conditions?
All the things that I was concerned with seem to be conditions so far, and plus there's some things that I haven't talked about that are conditions, like the value of the trees and what's the compensation.
I was thinking
for that.
more along the lines of the offer to reduce the number of arrays. Do you want to see a plan that actually shows which ones will be removed and what
What do you
the
guys think?
landscaping?
Put it on the record, so I think it's good to get it on the record.
Meaning,
The official record of the.
let's get the new
The
plan.
plan on the record.
So there's new information we want to get.
We can show you now, if that's sufficient, where those panels would be removed.
And instead, well, then we could make it a condition to receive them. I think we know the general intent.
And then the other aspect to that is what the impact to the landscaping and screening is going to be as a result.
Well, I think what would happen is, as you saw, where we've shown it is at the highest point. We're just gonna move the panels back and the fence, and those trees can stay where they are.
That's my guess.
That's the best place to go.
Yeah.
So really that cross section doesn't change. You just have the two that Rob's showing, and it will be starting at the point.
Are there other things that you guys can think of that we?
What was the calculation of the
Excuse
height
me,
of my
Jean.
deck?
Excuse me, Jean. Not, if you do want to, just hold on for a
Okay.
second, okay?
Sure.
Is there anything else that you want to?
Rob, were you gonna try to throw that image up of the,
I'd be happy to, if you like.
yeah, just so you have kind of a feel.
Jean, what is it?
I just missed the height of my deck. He
Yeah,
said
what-
70
what
feet,
else?
that was not what I was asking him.
Yeah, he was giving you the elevation.
Yeah, I
Not
asked the height of my deck.
Oh, I don't know that.
Well, I'm curious because he's never been on my deck, how he made that calculation.
You snuck up there and
With Mr. Henry, he wouldn't have not made it.
Well, you can make an assumption that it's on the second story, and houses are typically 8 feet per story. So that's probably what he did.
Well, I don't want an assumption, Steve.
Well,
I want an
it's gotta
accurate.
be within a foot.
I have a
That's why I'm
question.
questioning it.
I have a question about the, Joe Swarker's letter. I thought it was the board asked Joe to look at this project not for stormwater impact, but to how it met the criteria for the special permit. And-
Both. How it
No, I
met-
thought DEP, I mean, I agree with what Grego was saying. DEP settled that whole,
No, I understand, but stormwater insofar as it affected the special permit.
how it affects the special permit.
The
Right,
findings that the board.
Not the stormwater decision
Right.
that DEP has done.
right,
But
but
to
how
what
it fits
extent?
to the special
I
permit.
mean, my discussion with them was very simple. I said, they've just made all these changes to the plan,
Mhm.
most of which have to do with stormwater. We want to know if there's anything in those changes that affect what we have to do in the special permit process. That was my question.
And essentially what Joe did was review what had been submitted and say, all right, these are the presumptions with regard to the soil conditions. And the board really should have an idea as to what the actual conditions are rather than the presumed conditions.
Okay, so so what is the condition of, if you're gonna condition this project, what's the condition gonna be for those infiltration trenches? Because my concern is that, because I know what this land is like, there's a lot of boulders and erratics and rocks, and because they say they can put an infiltration trench here, doesn't necessarily mean that they can.
We understand that. We understand that.
Oh, okay.
That's why we raised the question, and that's why they're responding in such a way that they would do that work first.
Okay,
And because in the original discussion, it was they would do that work kind of like at the end, after
Right.
all the trees have been cut
Right,
down. After
right.
we said, no, do the infiltration things first.
My understanding from,
Still said-
and I'll let Steve speak to this, but I think that's still their position.
right.
That's right.
They're still kind of.
But so the idea is, if you get to the
All the
point,
trees,
if you get to the point where they've done the clearing and they're doing the infiltration trenches and they do the testing and the soil conditions aren't quite matching up to what they had presumed, they're either going, and therefore they can't control the stormwater in the manner that they had intended.
Then they
What's
have to
going to
go
have
back.
to happen is they're going to have to revise
the plan and go back to DEP.
and provide additional storage if necessary, which may result in a reduction in the size of the facility.
It would actually probably result in a reduction in the size of the stormwater management. They've now published their, the official solar rules, and they're far more lax than what we've used. They would allow us to use, to consider all of the pervious area for infiltration. So this site is way over-designed from what the published rules are now.
So my point is that I don't believe they've met the criteria for the special permit because they don't want to do the work until after the trees are out.
Okay. And just, go ahead.
Along the lines of the panels that would be removed, could you just give me the height, the topographical height of those?
Sure.
Just so I can
Yes.
understand that?
Yeah, where would be the best place? I'm gonna do that right here if you don't mind. So we have, there's roughly an elevation 80 and an elevation 70 that are running right through there. So we have, let's see. Actually, let me do one other one here. Let's go to this guy. Drainage. This, yes, let me do that. Okay, so we have, we have an elevation 70, which goes right through, this is, what is that? That is elevation 72. So we have an elevation 70 that goes right through here, and then an elevation 72 that goes right through here. And if you'd like, I can show you, go back to the, this section here. Right, so this is, actually this might be better here. So the ground in the bottom of the valley, oh, it's underneath that, is elevation 62. The base of the screening trees is at elevation 75. And you can see, this is to Steve's comment, that they're really in probably the best place because it actually comes over and drops a little bit as well. Over there.
So.
But I'm sorry.
So it's at 72, and so the rack is 10 feet high. So the elevation of the top of the rack is going to be 82, is that right?
That sounds about right, yeah. Yeah, I don't have the elevation of this pulled out, but the elevation of the base of the trees is, where did I just see that? Elevation of the base of the trees, here it is, elevation 75. So yeah, probably around 75 would be this one. So yeah, probably, I'd say 73 would be the base, so it would be about 83. And maybe 83, 85, the top of the screening trees is 87. If that helps. This is the panel, top of the panel, top of the screening elevation. Line of sight from 5 Courtney, line of sight from 6 Courtney. And then
The visual is the line of sight without the panel in it right now? Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, say again?
This graph is showing this height without adding the 10 feet for the panel?
No, those are the panels here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, these are 2 panels. It shows the fence, the trees, existing trees, and then the screened trees.
Okay, we're gonna do this now.
But not showing the.
Okay,
One last thing, could you go back to the drawing where it shows the revised panels? And, yeah, and then put your finger at the approximate location of 5 and 6. Courtney
5 and 6, so
Yeah.
5
will be right.
right here. Here and here, these 2 properties right here.
and the houses themselves are
Yeah.
off the chart.
And I can show you that
Yeah.
if it's helpful.
Yeah.
So this shows,
There we
That's
go, there we
6. Is that 6?
yeah, and then 5 is approximately right here.
So the reduction does go right where you want it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, it takes this whole
Yeah.
2 rows basically all the way off this edge. It would go from, the current screening distance is, I believe it's 430. With 1 row back, it would have been 466, and now a 2nd row back would be 496,
Can you tell me what
almost 500 feet.
what that distance is from the property line? It was 100 feet from the property line, what is it now?
160.
Well, let's see, we did switch that.
Because this is a living space here too. I mean, this is their cabana, they have all, they have grass here.
But in all probability, when you use the cabana, you won't see anything, because it's gonna be completely vegetated. I mean, the concerns we have here are from November to like April. And then when the leaves start to come out.
But we were out there, we did our site walk,
It was November.
But there's not a lot of low branches.
No, and that's what I mean, but I'm just saying that when, I was just responding to the cabana issue, that's all.
yeah.
I mean, in the summer,
Thereabouts.
believe me, you're not gonna see anything. It's not a concern of ours or of yours, but in the winter, that's when you're gonna, and that's when we did it. We did it right at, it was Thanksgiving weekend, and we could see it. So we said, no, we have to screen it, so that's the whole thing. All right, anything else, Alicia, or?
I just have a question. Rob said something about the rules have changed and now they're more lax.
Yes.
Will the conditions become more lax, or we're gonna keep the stringent conditions that are in?
What,
Correct.
they have been approved more stringently.
Okay, so if they do whatever, they can't come back, and he said, well,
Oh, I
they're
don't
more
know.
lax
They-
now, so I don't know how
Why
to.
Here,
do
we
that?
have DEP.
DEP.
Right, but just because the rules relax doesn't mean the expectations, our conditions should still be to that higher level, correct?
Yes,
Our conditions are gonna be based upon what the DEP
That's-
order of conditions, superseding
right.
order of conditions
not
requires. If they go back to DEP and DEP alters that order of conditions, that's going to be the operative document.
Even if we said they're less,
But that's just the stormwater.
correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
But
which-
the
so we
board,
all flat
the
out.
board does not have the authority in the bylaw to require stormwater management in excess of what is required under the state.
I wanted a clarification on that, thank you.
all right, let me see if I can figure this out. I would like to close it, but I want to make sure that we can get the information of the changes that we are been talking about. So,
Well, it's already been presented, so the modified plan he just showed you,
right,
those pink areas, is technically already in the record.
okay.
He should submit a copy.
And the landscape
I don't know if you
plan,
can email it
and
now
the
or not.
landscape plan is in the record. So most of the things, I think, are in the record. The thing that I'm concerned about is we haven't really discussed any adjustments to the tree payment that they've talked about.
Well, unless they're planning on submitting new evidence with regard to that, it's really part of your deliberation.
Okay. So maybe we're okay with that.
And what about an arborist or landscape? You're not gonna go that route?
Oh, we can have that as a condition of moving forward on the landscape plan, that they would meet with Martha and whoever the arborist or landscape architect would be. I'd be happy with the landscape architect.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Hi, Ryan Pritchie, 1 Courtney Drive. The area that you're gonna, the red area that you're gonna take out, those panels that are gonna be out of the plan, are you gonna leave the existing trees there? Or are you gonna take those trees down too, since they're gonna shade your panels?
Well, right now, they're right up to the fence, and that's what we do. We leave right up to the fence.
Okay, so the fence will be here, then there'll be 60 feet of clearing.
No.
No.
We move the trees.
It's gonna be 60 feet less of clearing. You actually
Okay.
gave us a figure,
Right,
although I'm not
that's
sure that
right.
that reflects where we're at now, because you had them sort of in another area, so I don't know.
It would be the same area reduction, but just.
No, I understand, but I don't know how much tree is in
Yeah.
one area as compared to the
Martha,
other.
what do you think
Yeah.
of closing the meeting?
It'd be very similar.
Are we leaving ourselves open?
Half an acre or less.
I don't think so. It's
No, I
not
understand
specific.
the area we're talking about is the number of trees. You gave us a number of trees
Sure.
that are being cleared, and I'm not sure it'll be consistent from.
Yeah, it's just a calculation based on the area.
Okay.
We have a density that's assumed for.
Gotcha.
Huh?
In our assessing the property value.
But if you're paying taxes on more than 600,000 or 780,000, whatever, you do an abatement. So you don't know if that.
Do we need a motion?
It's just a motion to close the public hearing.
But you
No,
have
once you
reminded
close
us
the public
that
hearing,
you're
we're now
paying taxes on more
under
than
your 90-day
800,000.
deadline to actually render a decision.
Right.
Which have for the section.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, you would.
Okay, so we're
You
gonna
are.
close the public hearing. After we close it officially, the board will deliberate and go through our decision criteria. During that time, it is not open for discussion. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's discussion among ourselves. If we need to ask you a question, we would. If we need to ask them a question, we will. But the public discussion has been closed,
So
okay?
pretty much get what you want to say out
Yeah.
loud. That's your nice way of saying that.
So,
I moved
But if you have to say anything else, now's the time to say it.
Officially want to enter into.
Can Martha just please tell me the height of that deck?
Departmental comments.
Did it say it?
all right, so before we do this, the 3 departmental contacts, the Newbury Fire Department,
I
thank
know the
you
height of my deck.
to contact us, and lastly, the fire department would like to request training
Okay.
from the installer, but he has really no issues with little installation. How many else could I say? Is there anything else that's here?
Education and shutdown.
Yeah, will require power shut off for the area located just in the gated area. Will also require key box. This will be at the expense of the owner. The fire department. Have you seen these, by the way? Yeah. Accessibility will have to be maintained at all times, including snow removal and removal of overgrowth. I would also like to see a plan in writing in these situations. Okay. Michael Riley, hi Martha. I reviewed the plans for the solar project. Everything looks great. Please make sure they remove the snow accordingly. Police Chief Michael Riley. And then finally, hi Martha again. I'm sorry. I got the plans from Ellen this morning for the solar array at 136. I don't see any issues with them other than some traffic construction during construction. They are accessing the construction area from an existing driveway that should help keep the dirt off the main road. If you need anything else, please let me know. James Surratt, DPW Facilities Manager, Town of Newbury. So that's really quite helpful. Thank you. So is that's somewhat written into the record, but submit them to the record.
Ready?
Yeah.
Right. I move to close the public hearing on this matter.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is go to I'm going to read quickly from, this is on page, what's 19 of 31 that we have. The construction, and it's in item 6B02. And in the middle of it, just a reminder, the construction of a ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation of 2 acres or more shall be permitted, subject to the issuance of a special permit and provided that the use complies with all requirements set forth herein. All such solar voltaic installations shall be constructed and operated in a manner that minimizes any adverse visual, safety, and environmental impacts. No special permit shall be granted unless the SPGA, us, finds in writing that the criteria listed in what we'll be going through below have been met. So, special. So there are a number of things that I am going to not skip over. Yeah, I guess I will. But there are required documents in the plans which have been submitted, and I assume, Martha, that these have been submitted and they are all correct. Okay. In addition to those kind of submissions, there needs to be proof of liability insurance. There needs to be a description of the financial surety that satisfies our section of decommissioning, and we have proof of that. We have some difference of opinion, and so we'll talk about that. And then a public outreach plan. They did do a public outreach plan. I might add, it wasn't the best I've ever seen. Plans and documents as required by the town's stormwater management and illicit discharge erosion commission. All right. Item D, special permit review criteria. Open space and agricultural impact. Consistent with the town's open space preservation goals, the owner of the land on which a large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation is proposed to be situated must submit to the SPGA a report on the open space impacts of the installation, including but not limited to. So I'm going to read through these and just ask Martha to ensure that in fact they have been submitted, okay? A general description of the installation site, including proximate natural features, flora, fauna, wetlands, and waterways. Any trees or wildlife to be displaced by the installation. Yes. Any efforts to mitigate groundwater management issues caused by increase in impervious surface, what we've been talking about. D, the suitability of installation and location for agricultural, including information about soil grade and any history of agricultural use on the site within 10 years prior to the special permit or site plan review thereof. And
That was in there.
that was in there. Any environmental remediation efforts that the owner or operator anticipates will be necessary for installation, maintenance, or removal of the installation. Okay. Right? We do? Okay. In determining whether to issue a special permit, the SPGA will consider the open space and agricultural impact report and the corresponding impacts. Now, it's my understanding that we never really had a separate report, but all of the elements are in what we just went through.
They're in the application. What they did was they responded to each of these.
They responded to each one, okay. Anybody have a comment on that? No? Then we have, I think, a section which really maybe doesn't belong under open space, but I will read it as item G, 1G, land clearing, soil erosion, and habitat impacts. Clearing of natural vegetation shall be limited to what is necessary for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the ground-mounted photovoltaic installation or otherwise prescribed by applicable laws, regulations, and bylaws, including the Code of the Town of Newbury, Chapter 87, Stormwater Management and List of Discharge of Erosion Control. In determining whether to issue a special permit, the SPGA shall consider such impacts and efforts to mitigate them. The applicant and any co-applicants may be required to replace up to 100% of any and all trees with a caliber of 6 inches or over that are removed for the project. So I'd like to address that for a second. What the count is that 1,642 trees are being removed. From the beginning of the project, almost 4 years ago, we have talked about that. We thought, the planning board thought, that was not in accordance with the guidance that either the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or our zoning code puts forward. So we had asked for an estimate of, well, either replanting. Now, the word that I'm stuck with on this is that may be required to replace. So I've asked our attorney, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that we can go and ask, go to Corliss and find out from Corliss that a replacement tree for the 1,600 would cost $100 each, and so the remediation we're looking for is $162,000. Now, honestly, I don't think that's crazy. It says replacement. You're asking the town to give up a bit of a variance to a request to tear down all those trees. And I think that the remuneration that you made on Middle Road was obviously inadequate. So how do you propose to increase this?
You can increase it. I think your $100 a tree is unreasonable. I mean, if you consider, if you're a private landowner, for his tree that we're taking down for the project, and he has to pay to cut those trees down to have this project. So I understand what you're saying, that a variance is almost required, and we're paying for that.
And I'm...
Mr. Chairman, I want to clarify, this isn't a situation where there's a variance. This is going to the findings that you need to make. That there is a portion of the bylaw that discourages clear cutting. And one way for you to get to the finding you need to make with regard to that issue is whether or not the trees are being adequately replaced, as stated in the bylaw.
And so I look at planting 3-foot-high sticks at $4 a piece as being inadequate. you might look at my $100 as being.
Right, so we've gotta come somewhere in between. And if you, I can tell you, if you buy and you plant a smaller shrub, let's say 5 to 6 feet high, it's gonna be $30 for an evergreen shrub, which would be, I mean, that's how you replant a forest, really, and that's what we're taking out. So I don't know if that's the answer, it's in between, but that's kind of reality what you could do, because you can't replace full-size trees, you just can't. So you gotta be reasonable, because there's a lot of them. Granted, we've reduced the number of trees also quite a bit, and even with that
Okay,
reduction, moving over.
that's fair, that's fair. So whatever the final count would be, I think that 30 might be low because you have to plant them too. That might
That
be what.
includes planting. If you consider how many they're planting, they're gonna give you
Okay,
a rate on
but
it.
if you can get me that actual cost from somebody who gets that, what?
That would be introducing new information after the hearing's been closed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Let's avoid that. I think so there's been a suggestion that $30 per tree might be more reasonable. If we're looking at 1,600 trees, that's $48,000.
What do you think?
That's good.
That's good.
When do we accept it? Is that real?
Yes.
I'll accept that. But I think we need to vote on it.
Well, and I think we should point out that anything you're discussing tonight is really still, it's straw votes. It's for discussion purposes. We're going to draft a decision that you will review in its
That's fine.
totality. So there
But
will
let's
be
not
final
miss,
determination.
let's not miss that item then, okay? Okay, the O&M has been submitted, and now that I remember seeing it in the stormwater plan, but I didn't see the other plan. I think it's fine. And it does note that you are the person to contact, which I thought that was interesting. Katie? Did you know that?
The person of contact for the O&M plan,
Yeah?
if in regards to,
Well, I think that should change actually, but
You think that changed? I was thrilled to see his name on it.
he's the landowner.
He's the landowner.
He could be a contact person.
I think
but
he can be a contact.
I
I think it'd
he
be a
could
good
a
idea. I
contact
think it'd be a good idea,
I don't think it's a bad idea.
right? I don't think
Katie
it's a good
doesn't
idea.
mind, I think they call us first and then we should answer, but if there were any other concerns, I think that's.
Okay, so we, around $50,000 for the trees. Operation and maintenance plan, the applicant and co-applicant shall submit, all right, he has done that. Site condition suitability, all appurtenant structures, including but not limited to equipment, shelters, storage facilities, transformers, and substations, shall be architecturally compatible with each other. Structures shall be screened from views by means of vegetation fencing, physical topography to the extent reasonable and practical, considering the characteristics of the individual site. In determining whether to issue a special permit, the SPGA shall consider the sufficiency of the architectural compatibility of the structures in efforts to screen the structure from view. You know, I don't think we've ever paid a lot of attention to the structures that are out there. I mean, I hate to sound ignorant, but what are they? Just the transformers like we saw on the other site. It's just not an issue, it's the panels that are the major issue. Okay.
I think it's not unusual, at least previously, for these type of facilities to actually have structures constructed. That wasn't part of this.
Okay. All right, the SPGA, this is O2 of the special permit review criteria. The SPGA may grant a special permit only upon finding that proposed use meets the standards specified in 9711C of Newbury zoning code bylaw and the following general standards. A, the proposed use and development will not have a substantial or undue adverse effect upon adjacent property, the character of the area, or the public health, safety, and general welfare. So because this and B, and I'll read B as well, B, the nature and intensity of the intended operations will not discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent land and buildings nor impair the value thereof. So I'd like to take them as an entity, but I'd like to have each board member maybe address them. So maybe starting with you, Jim.
Yes, I have a concern with A. It's based on the fear of the neighbors that their property values will be significantly diminished as a result of this. And they have some real estate agents that support that. I'm not sure I agree 100%, but I think the fact that they feel so strongly counts for a lot. Now, I think what we did this evening, it kind of changes that somewhat, but I haven't been able to digest how much that really means to me. But it's the old question of sometimes perception is more important than reality, and I think the perception is that they're going to take a bath. And I'm not sure that's true, but it's clearly the way they feel.
Okay. Anything else on that? Thank you.
I think
George?
with all the effort that's been done with shielding and extra trees and moving back the arrays and so on, I think many of those items in concern have been diminished. Value of real estate is subjective. Anything can make real estate value go up or down. It could be a bad storm, it could be a hurricane, anything. Loss of character of the house. If somebody walked in and said, I don't like the paint colors, that loses value of the house. So anything can happen. You just don't know. So that's less of a concern to me than it might have been some time ago, because I think all these issues have been answered to protect them.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Peter?
I think both A and B have a certain degree of unknown, and I think that's been discussed. With regards to G, I think we could talk about the screening piece, but I think both A and B have some unknown to it, and I don't know if we know all of what the unknowns are.
Well, let me ask you if they're unknown, are they strongly unknown to you? In that when you, yeah, we know what we don't know. If you look at the screening,
Well, it's G.
G, does that tend to answer some of your uncertainty or not?
I think what's been discussed tonight helps address some of that, and I think having that finally laid out would be very helpful. But the effects of property value, I think George kind of said it. It can be up, it can be down. We don't know what those variables are. And I spoke with a realtor who said it's going to increase the property value by having conservation area next to near the property. So I think it's going to, these two variables, I think, are dependent upon who we get information from and how we interpret it. If that doesn't confuse you.
Well, it leaves me with not a clear understanding of where you sit on it. That except for that you are unsure.
I have unknown next to both of them.
Okay. Rachel?
In terms of how it might affect value or not, I don't think there is any, at least I wasn't able to find any empirical information that would advise us on that. I think it is incumbent upon the applicant to provide the cloak of invisibility to the project. And if that is done, then I don't think that it will negatively impact the value. But you can't see it. I mean, you really can't see it.
So when I started this process, I spent a good deal of time talking to the town manager from Dartmouth, the town manager from Marion, and various other real estate folks on the South Shore where they had installed a number of these facilities. And that was when Greg was still around, and we had a lot of very intense discussions about this. And I think Greg, I gave him the names of these folks, and I think he contacted them as well. I was surprised at the extent to which they believed that there was no impact to residential property values in the towns that they were the town managers for, or were real estate brokers for. And I went down and I drove through them and I looked at the facilities. They were certainly not the same, but they were, you could see comparisons between the two. But then we went through another period of time, and when we did our analysis in Thanksgiving weekend, and it was very clear to me that there was just a certain parts of the property that you could see the arrays from. And that's why item G, to me, became absolutely critical. And that's why when you came back in this time, I don't think you hadn't been part of the team. And you were suggesting 3-foot high pines. No. No. Whatever it takes to screen these is what's necessary. And if it's not adequate by the time that it's done, then you go back out and do it again. And we'll go back out with you and we'll bring the community with us to make sure that it is done. Because you are imposing something on a community. And you have to be a good neighbor. I mean it. So I do believe this has been a very difficult problem. I mean, I'm going to focus on these two items because they've dominated all of our thinking. But having gone back and forth, I spoke to local real estate brokers, and some have said no impact, and some have said positive impact, and some have said negative impact. So it's very clear to me there's nothing out there within the real estate community which is clear and definitive at this point in time. But I think that we have an opportunity to do something, both in terms of what you have come back with in terms of your DEP response, and I think in terms of the screening, which I think will be excellent, and reduction in the size of the project, that I think that it should not have an adverse effect on the community. So that's my response to A and B. Now, as far as C, I'm going to read through and keep on going. We will go as long as we can. I want to get rid of as many, well, we have to get to N, all right? So I think we can do this, all right?
For some will be no comment, at least for me.
Yeah, all proposed traffic access and access ways shall be adequate, but not excessive, in number adequate, and with alignment and visibility sufficiently separated from street intersections and places of public assembly, and shall meet similar safety considerations. Anybody have any?
No comment.
No comment.
I don't know. You guys? Adequate, safe, and accessible off-street parking and loading spaces shall be provided to avoid parking in public streets of vehicles belonging to persons connected with the visiting the site, including at a minimum parking for 3 trucks and 2 automobiles. Now, I wasn't sure about that. Do you have parking for 3 trucks?
Yes.
You do? Because I don't remember.
There's some small pull-out areas that are 18 feet wide, and I think 18 feet long, so you have a pickup truck, yeah. So you got 2 parking spaces.
Okay. E, adequate access to each structure or for fire and emergency services equipment shall be provided, keys, etc. That's what the fire chief just asked for, and all portions of the project shall be provided to the fire department and the police department. F, the proposed use and development will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any natural, scenic, or historic feature or significant importance. Any comments on that?
Well, I have a comment on that, the clear cutting of 1,600 trees or close to it is just a fact of life. There's little to nothing we can do about that. But I would frankly like to compliment Mr. Rosine and others. I think the rest of the plan regarding the environment, stormwater, etc., is good. It's very well done. I mean, to me, you appear to go in the extra mile. But the 1,600 trees, they're gone.
Anybody over here? Okay. Rachel? G, the entire project site shall be screened at all seasons of the year from the view of adjacent residential lots and streets and roadways, and the general landscaping of the site shall be in character with that generally prevailing in the neighborhood. So I don't know how we reintroduce, I'm just suggesting to the community that arborvitae is the fastest growing tree, and it's a very effective screen, and some of these others that are being suggested, like the pitch pine, which we know from the project we were just looking at in the fall, is not a good screen. So I'm not sure. I think that what we've suggested here is that Martha will work with a landscape architect to come up with an acceptable screening species plan. Okay.
Can we have some sort of inspection?
Yes. Well, what we'll do is we'll have an inspection upon completion of, before it's ready to be operated. And so it would be after they get a building permit and are getting ready to operate, we will send a team out to inspect. And they'll inspect from the things that we're concerned with, the bridge going over, bringing into the site, let's call it the toll road going into the site. It's not really a toll road, but you know what I mean. The fence, to make sure that the fence was done correctly with adequate space underneath it, that it's black and it's not shiny, that the landscaping is done correctly, that the infiltration sites are done correctly. So, you know, it's a good deal of work, but it's got to be done before that. And it's the role of the planning board, town planner, and Concom, I would think, would also want to be part of that. You know, certainly parts of it. So I think we should do that.
Mr. Chair, we often work with code and inspection as part of that.
Okay.
And part of the notice and
Yeah.
comment.
I got it.
What about inspections by Joe? I'm not sure it pertains necessarily.
It doesn't, it's not this part of this criteria, but we I don't know if you had Joe, no, you probably didn't have Joe work at Middle Road. But the planning board always has our engineer check on things during construction. You had
Sure.
raised an issue, you were concerned with that. You shouldn't be.
I only meant if they were going to be there for, by my side while I did, for each test.
No, don't worry about it. He's there to check on the status of the
And that I
project.
understand completely.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay. The volume, okay. HI, adequate provision shall be provided for stormwater management. I guess we don't have to go through that. We know that it has been. J, obstruction of scenic views from publicly accessible locations shall be minimized. Any comment?
No.
Yes? I think we're okay. Glare from site lighting shall be minimized. I actually raised, I saw the cuts. I wasn't sure if those were the best. Our criteria indicates lights that are straight down, and they look like they were this kind of lighting.
Well, they can, there's a shield that goes on it that forces it down. But these are lights that are gonna be at the equipment areas, they're never on. They're only on if there's a maintenance issue in the middle of the night, which typically there won't be, because nothing's happening at night. They'll come the next day. This is
So those are the only lights, the only lights that are out there are those?
Yep.
That's not for security?
Nope, these are never on. They're never used, they're just there, just in case.
So they're on-off lights if there's a varmint that goes underneath them?
There's a motion sensor on these, so that when somebody shows up, it turns on, but you can adjust the sensitivity so that it will not go on if there's something that goes across.
And when you install them, just install them so they're not,
Yeah,
and
there's a
not
switch.
going towards Courtney Drive.
Yeah, exactly.
You
We can
know?
do that, yes.
So we might have a condition that requires.
Yeah. We can face them the other direction, you can make that a condition.
L, sound impacts from transformers, inverters, and other electrical equipment shall be mitigated with the use of enclosures, shielding, and placement of the sound generating equipment on the site. Now, we had a noise study done of this, and the conclusion was that it met the town's noise decibel levels and that we didn't have an issue with it, right? So I don't know that, did anybody else have any thoughts on that?
If there is excessive noise that we determine later on, then we can call for screening.
Yeah, but it was their analysis of the type of facility that this was, that this is just not an issue.
Okay.
Unreasonable departure from the character, materials, and scale of buildings in the vicinity as viewed from public ways and places shall be minimized.
John?
Yeah.
We never talked about the visibility for Route 95 in the fall, in the winter.
I've thought about that. Why would we have an obligation to block the view from I-95? If you drive around interstates, you see, solar arrays everywhere you go.
One of the things that I have been recently impressed with driving on the Mass Pike,
One of them.
right? And my instant reaction was, that's great.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that wonderful to see them, right next to the roadway? And,
Residential departure from character. That's the,
yeah.
Well, given the fact that there's so much conservation land though in that area, I'm not sure we have to be able to see it from 95 if it's at all fixable, if there's some way to, you probably will see it in the middle of the winter.
Oh, I would, well,
Does anybody know offhand what the distance is to?
It's 490 feet.
Oh, jeez.
Won't be bad.
Nikes get excited about that.
2 football fields almost.
Yeah.
No, but you raised it, what else? Anything else on that? Just that we hadn't thought about? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. N, the proposed development of the site shall be in compliance with the provisions of the Newbury zoning bylaw, including parking, signs, landscaping, environmental standards, and other pertinent sections. And I think that's fine. Final action, a special permit shall be granted by the SPGA after
John, I got one thing before you leave that. It goes to Article 1 and 3, the general provisions of the zoning bylaws, which gets to benefit to the community and to appropriate use and so on. I still am not thrilled with the benefit to the community. In fact, we really don't even know in dollar and cents what the benefit to the community is. I don't think it's a showstopper, but...
What did I not read? Where are we in that?
You gotta go back to here. General provisions, Article 1 and Article 3, which are the zoning bylaws, so spoon.
Article 1.
Yeah. I brought it up last meeting. It's
Yeah, no.
It's a concern.
But this is not in this, this is in the general zoning code, is that we took this out of, right? Yeah,
Right,
right. Okay, let me.
But N refers to the.
Yep.
bylaws, so.
The purpose and intent of this bylaw is to promote the health and safety and general welfare of the inhabitants of the town of Newbury, including without limitation to conserve health, to secure safety from fire, flood, panic, and other dangers, to provide adequate light and air, to prevent overcrowding of land, to avoid undue concentration of population, to encourage housing for persons of all income levels, to facilitate the adequate provisions of transportation, water supply, drainage, sewage, schools, parks, open space, and other public requirements, to conserve the value of land and buildings, including the conservation of natural resources and the prevention of blight and pollution of the environment, to encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout the town, to preserve and increase amenities by the promulgation of regulations to fulfill and set objectives. But where's the thing about the value to the town?
That's
Here it is,
3.
okay.
It's lengthy, but there's just one.
Well, I
phrase.
might be able to chop it off here, let me just see
Yeah.
that. after a public hearing of which due notice is given to any party in interest is defined in section 11, chapter 40A of the general laws, the proposed use, building or structures is for the best interest of the town, is not injurious or obnoxious to the neighboring properties, and will satisfy a community need or convenience not otherwise being served, and will not affect abutting nearby properties. Okay.
So just a comment, I think the project's a little weak there, but again, probably not a showstopper. It's a concern.
Well, it's an awful lot of what the community has been saying. And so I guess my question to you is the extent to which you think this is an issue, and to what extent you think that we need to address it.
I think we've pretty much done all we can do. I would feel better if I knew just what kind of revenue the town was going to get for this. We have that estimate of 30,000 from pilot.
Well, that is what the agreement was for Mill Road, and it's gonna be similar to that. It would be, it's gonna be similar. It's not gonna be a whole lot more, it's probably gonna be a little more, but, that's something.
Is it directly a function of the kilowatt?
I'm not sure how it was agreed to, but it's a value of the system.
It's 12.5 cents a kilowatt hour or something right now, and so I think it's 36,000 a year, 690,000 over 20 years.
And that's on top of the tax.
So I guess I don't know if this is an appropriate question for you, Paul, or you. But this is an interesting question. And I know that one of the things that we have been working with, and some of the assumptions, were that saying, and similar to the recreational and medicinal marijuana requirement, these are things that are coming from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and requirements that various towns accept these things as a matter of that it's something that is given that you should accept it. You can't automatically reject it. So I wonder if you might, can you put this kind of concern of our local code into the overriding concerns of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
My concern with that would be that Chapter 48, Section 3 lists solar as an exempt use. There is some case law, but it's at the trial court level that suggests that a municipality may limit solar to particular zoning districts. However, Newbury hasn't done that. So this use is allowed in the zoning district in which the property is located. So you want to make sure you're not being too cavalier in saying that you can't put a solar project in a location next to a residential property when your zoning bylaw allows it.
Right.
You don't want to back yourself into the position where a decision essentially invalidates your zoning bylaw by being more restrictive than what it purports to be.
And so we have these issues with these overriding things that come from the Commonwealth, where, well, look what's going on with 40B and affordable housing. You know, our hands are tied. And not, this is at least a little bit easier for us, but the normal kind of dictates that come, or the preambles and the dictates and the language that we have in what the zoning code is trying to do is affected by other things. And I think that's the dilemma here. And it's a dilemma that the community has. And I understand that we've had.
Yeah, no, mine is not a legalistic concern. It's just that, you asked for, do you have concerns? Yeah, I have a concern. I wish the community were getting more from this, but it is what it is. And so, I can live with it. It's just kind of a concern.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. There you go, thanks. So, I'm going to finish this section here. Site control, I don't think we need to talk about that. We assume you have site control. Operation and maintenance plan is being talked about again. Notification, no ground mounted solar volcanic installation shall be constructed until evidence has been given to the town that the owner and operator of said installation has, though that you've notified the utility company that operates the electric grid where the installation is, that you're going to be doing this. I mean, have you had those discussions, and I assume you have. Right? Dimensions and density requirements, setbacks for this kind of facility, 50 feet, and I think that, what was the latest one, 150, 155 or something like that?
160.
To the,
160.
160. Height, no ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation or structure appurtenant to thereto shall be more than 15 feet in height, measured from the adjacent grade. Appurtenant structures, we've already talked about that. Design standards, lighting, we just talked about that. Consistent with local, state, and federal law, lighting of all other parts, we'll make that a condition to make sure it's not shining. Signs in accordance with the Newbury bylaw. Utility connections. Noise, inverters must be in all noise in compliance with Massachusetts Environmental Protection's noise regulations, and we've done that test to find that it is. Safety and environmental standards, emergency services, fire and police chief, you've done that. The owner of operators shall operate and cooperate with the local emergency services in developing an emergency response plan. Have you done that? Emergency response plan?
We talked to the fire department about before we fire up the system that we.
And again, you don't need to do that for our approval, but it's got to be something that's got to be done, you know, as you're getting your building permit.
So the fire department has asked for training?
Excuse me?
The fire department has asked for training before it becomes operational, so
Yes.
we should probably include that as a condition.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Right. Then there's a safety disconnect. Is in the letter.
The safety disconnect is part of the package. When you put it together.
It depends on what the fire department wants, but we can do that.
So it says solar photovoltaic installation shall be designed to disconnect automatically from the electricity.
Oh, yeah.
Electric utility system in the event that the grid experiences power.
That's typical, yeah.
Right. And then land clearing again, limit just to the area. Security fencing, black vinyl, 8 feet high. Keys shall be provided in Newbury Fire Chief. Monitoring and maintenance. Oh, and then abandoning commissioning, and I just think that this is, how are we going to handle this, Paul? That we do want to look at the numbers that you gave us and come up with a number.
Yeah, I think that
agree to it.
can be a subject of further discussion.
Okay. And pretty, they're in 25%. This is one I think you asked, or somebody did. Alicia, upon subsequent conveyance of said ground-mounted photovoltaic installation, any subsequent owner of facility shall provide a replacement surety in a form or principal amount determined to be reasonable, not be higher than 125%, and that has to be done every 5 years. The principal amount of the surety will be adjusted for inflation every 5 years for as long as the surety is in force. And that's it. So, based on that and that discussion, I guess I'd like your thoughts about how we had two individuals who have some concerns about two of these items. How do we move forward with these?
I think that the best approach is to move forward with a draft decision that addresses all of the findings that the board needs to make. And then the board can actually vote on each of those findings.
Okay.
I have some concerns with regards to A, B, and F
Yeah,
and how they interplay, and whether or not, if they are interpreted in a manner that could be seen as being too restrictive, therefore leading to an invalidation of chapter 48, section 3. So I think that to the extent that the board finds a problem and is unwilling to move forward with those findings, if you don't get the requisite number of votes, I still think the board should move forward and address the rest of the decision as well, and make the rest of the findings necessary, so that you have those to fall back on if for some reason there is an appeal of a decision saying that they haven't met A, B, and G.
okay.
That you've made your additional findings as well to support your decision.
All right, so the logistics of this is Martha and you? Okay. And I think that's what, right? And that we would look forward to then having a vote. And this is the key thing. It's going to be in March. Probably March 21st, is it? Our second meeting in March. That should give everyone enough time to write a rather complicated decision and get review.
I have a question.
No, hold on. So is that okay?
Sure. Now, is our vote then overall up or down, or are we gonna go through this list?
Well, the decision is going to cite, as we do with all our decisions, it'll cite every element. And it probably will leave out the first two because we don't have unanimity. I mean, on those A and B. But all the others will go through. Wouldn't it be the way we do it?
They have, yeah, there'll have to be discussion
There'll be discussion.
on those.
You just leave it as it's written in here, and we'll discuss it again. We'll discuss A and B again.
But I would suggest drafting a full decision with all appropriate conditions, and then the board can make the
Right.
determination whether it agrees
And we
with
have
those
to add all the
conditions,
conditions in that we've talked about.
whether it thinks that additional conditions are necessary to address concerns that might be raised with regard to any of the
Right.
findings.
Right. I think that's good. And that gives everybody enough time to review them and think everything over.
Yeah, the changes you
I'm
made
sorry.
tonight are huge, so I think we gotta digest those.
Okay.
Very simple.
So you went through the findings, but there's still 5 criteria for the special permit. It hasn't, we can go through that the next time.
What part?
Is the best interest of the town, injured or not.
The general special permit criteria, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, because is there a need not otherwise served in the town? There's 2 other, there's 5 of them. In order to issue the special permit.
I don't mind saying, Paul, I wasn't sure that we did that when we had our special requirements for this. I thought that only pertained to, like, the selectmen have a very general criteria for their board, for their special permits,
Well,
which is what they just went through with the golf course.
I think that the bylaw has criteria that are applicable to the issuance of special permits, so the board should review that.
Okay,
I think we can hold off and do that as part of
okay,
the next round. To the extent that there is a potential conflict between the specific provisions within the solar bylaw and the general provisions, I think the specific
Specific
provisions
overrule.
would control.
they control.
But I'm not necessarily sure that there are any direct conflicts. And again, the board has to keep in mind, that anything within your bylaw has to stay kosher with the intentions under 48 section 3.
Right.
And Paul, I have another question. Do they need to have, and this is, do they have to have, any special permit granting authority, do they have to have a body of evidence within something to fall back on to say this is why I believe this is in the best interest of the town?
Well, they're gonna be basing it upon all of the material that has been submitted throughout the course of the hearing. There's no requirement that they specifically list every piece of evidence that supports whatever finding that they're making.
Okay.
You reference everything, but to the extent that we are able, I can see having information in there about reasons why. But I don't think it's
Right, well,
required.
I mean, I think when you go through it, you have to, well, I don't know if you have to, but I think that you would want to go through it and say, well, almost like a pros and cons list. This is for, this is against,
Sure.
and then kind of like weigh it. But I think to not pay attention to any, to certain evidence that was submitted, I don't know, can they do that? Can they pick and choose what evidence you want to?
Well, I mean, ultimately, yes. Whenever a board is making a decision and they're receiving essentially evidence from parties in favor and parties that are against, they have to pick and choose which ones they believe are correct, meet the criteria of which they have to make their decision. It's inevitable that that's going to be done. It certainly is helpful, particularly on issues that are very highly contentious, such as the valuation issue, and how that impacts and how it ties into the screening issue. The board probably would be well advised to provide more information and explain exactly what it is that they're relying upon in their decision rather than less. But, for aspects of the findings that they need to make that are not particularly controversial, it may simply be, the plans were submitted and they show this and that's.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we need to vote on anything on this?
No, you vote.
Can I ask a question?
Close the hearing.
Just a second.
You need to vote on the, did you vote on the 21st as your next?
No, we have to do that.
date?
Let's do that. Let's do that.
It's not a continuation of the public hearing, it's essentially a deliberative session, but it has to be run in public hearing.
So do we need to vote on that?
I
Let's have a regular meeting.
But I would vote to go to a deliberative session.
Okay.
March 20th.
Okay.
Okay, I move that the planning board hold its deliberative session on this matter on the 21st of March at a regular meeting.
Second. Any comment? All those in favor? Okay, so this issue is closed?
Can I
We'll
ask
move
that
on.
question?
Yes.
When this thing was all built and everything, whether it's a year from now or 2 years from now, will we have, if all of a sudden evaluation doesn't factor down, we'll have an opportunity to get an abatement for the taxes? I mean, if the house is assessed at a certain amount and then all of a sudden it drops $100,000? I'm just asking a question.
I don't know the answer to that,
Okay.
but if
There is a process.
there's a process.
In which you can file, and if you can provide evidence that
Yeah,
the value
okay.
of your house hasn't decreased, then you can certainly file a request for an abatement. I would also like to point out, nothing's been approved yet. The board has not made a determination as to whether or not they're going to grant this.
They're not gonna what?
The board has not yet made a determination whether or not to grant.
Oh, I
There's
understand.
a couple of key items where there's
I
less
just
than
wanted to,
consensus.
I just want to be assured that, when a thing's actually built and the realtor actually looks at it, and if I put my house up for sale and they say, well, it's not worth what you thought it was, that kind of thing,
Irrespective of whether or not a drop in value in your house is related to this project or not, you have the right to go for an abatement.
Well, the thing is, if I did put my house up for sale and the thing isn't built yet, I'll have to have a contingency somewhere saying that there is something going next door that was approved and it hasn't been built yet. But, and that could shy people away from buying the house. Not that I'm looking to sell, I'm just saying that scenario is gonna have to happen. That's gonna have to happen.
And that has been discussed through the course of the year.
Yes, it has.
Okay, we're moving on to another subject.
What's the next subject?
Hmm?
What's the next subject? The pot?
Proposal, yeah, pot.
Mr. Chairman, do you need any more?
No, thank you very much. Thank you all, everybody.
Drive safely.
Thank you all, drive safely.
See you in March.
See ya. So, on the recreational marijuana, George and I were talking about it yesterday, that we have a document that's about 12 pages long. We had gone over it with Kate, who's our new attorney. I think she's done a nice job of giving us something to chew on, but I think there's changes that need to be made. I wasn't happy with some of the definitions. I don't know what else you
No,
had
they
issues
weren't
with.
good. I think they had to be more tied to the statute.
Yeah, and so what I'm hoping is that how we move through this is an important thing, isn't it? That what's the timing, Martha?
Well, we need to make sure that we meet the deadlines for town meeting. I think we could probably talk to Tracy about it, because I'm not quite sure when the selectmen are going to vote on the warrant. But I think that it should be ready by our next meeting
Which is February 21st, 24th.
to the selection and have them refer it back to us.
Should be,
Oh, I think we should.
Should be.
I'd rather read it.
I mean, I'm here until, the 15th, and so I can give my 2 cents, but I'm really looking more to you to.
Busy staff.
So let's do it that way then, and we'll aim at our next meeting. All right? And then, huh?
It'd be way, hello.
Somebody's asking me these questions.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll tell you in a second. Byfield Estates 40B, that's next Monday, right? And the concerns I have is that, as far as I can tell, they still haven't answered our questions.
No, they haven't.
And I'm not sure, what should I do, go and berate them? Or, I mean, you can't do that because you're kind of there, right? Or can you do that at that meeting?
I'd have to step away from the table.
Step away from the
Yeah.
table and ask, we sent this letter and we've gotten no answer. What do you think, Martha?
Well, I think you could do that or draft
Do it in writing,
do it in writing and then also be there and back it up,
but get it to Howie.
But what is our letter, what are we saying? We
Well-
wrote a letter and we attached the letter and say we never heard anything back?
We haven't gotten back.
And that's probably, when did we send it? December?
It was just, yeah, it was December, I think.
Well, maybe you and I should talk about it, soon, I guess, maybe tomorrow,
Yeah, it would have to be tomorrow.
and see what we should do.
Don't they only have to respond to the ZBA? They don't have to respond to us, do they?
Well,
I mean, they may have to respond
I don't know
our
the answer to
issues
that.
to the ZBA, but I don't.
I think they don't have to, right, but they have not responded to the ZBA.
Right.
And they have made a point of saying, here's our response to the fire department, here's our response to the police department, but we never get anything because we ask more difficult questions.
Some of the items in the letter have been judiciously avoided.
I've noticed that.
So I think it's good to get it lined out in a letter which would go to Howie, simply saying, Dear Chairman, ZBA, we have not received answers to these questions which we referred to you. Or you have not received answers to the questions that we referred to you.
Okay,
So one way or the other, they've got to get the message.
all right, we'll work on that. All right, new business, none. Well, are there critical items we need to talk about in liaison reports now that we're 3 hours into our meeting?
No.
No.
No. Not mine. Yours? No.
No.
Then let's call for
Motion to
a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
I just gave it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No discussion.